Universe Limit True Treasure, Divine Demon Halberd. It's rumored that when young Master Qingmu reached the ruler realm, he triggered a heavenly phenomenon. A divine halberd shot out from the depths of the universe and fell into young Master Qingmu's hands, automatically recognizing him as its master. It seems like it's this divine demon halberd. In addition, young Master Qingmu also has the Demon Phoenix bloodline. Demon Phoenixes are a large branch of the Phoenix clan. They are violent and battle-hungry, also known as the Nine-Headed Phoenix. In an instant, everyone's gaze is focused as they began to discuss and narrate the power of young Master Qingmu's divine art. The Star Rhythm ruler was even more excited. She continued to introduce to Jian Wushuang and the Stardust ruler. Quickly look, young Master Qingmu is about to make a move. This is the first time in 10,000 years that Shi Feng has made a move. Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent as he sized up young Master Qingmu. It had to be said that young Master Qingmu was indeed quite good. Even before he made a move, the aura he exuded was no weaker than that of Emperor Golden Crow, who Jian Wushuang had defeated on the ancient path of stars. On the high platform, good! A grave look appeared in the eyes of the Prime Peak ruler, and he didn't dare to be careless. With a wave of his right hand, a glass abacus appeared in his hand. You can lose. Young Master Qingmu's expression was indifferent as he casually raised the divine demon halberd and pressed it down on ruler Prime Peak. This halberd was as heavy as 10,000 June. It was as if 3 mountains and 5 mountains had descended, and its mighty power reached the heavens. Endless divine power surged in all directions. You! Prime Peak ruler grimaced. The halberd hadn't even pressed down, but he already felt like there was a blade on his back, and all his hair stood on end. Go! He braced himself and shouted in a low voice, his 5 fingers quickly fiddling on the abacus. Whoosh! 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 Instantly, beads spun and shot out from the abacus like meteors to meet the halberd. Bang! A huge explosion was heard and the entire Spratly Sand Island shook. Dust rose into the air, forming white smoke. When the smoke dispersed, the Prime Peak ruler was half kneeling on the ground, his face the color of a pig's liver as he panted heavily. As for young Master Qingmu, who was holding the divine demon halberd, he was like a high and mighty god. He lowered his head and looked down at Yuan Prime Peak ruler, indifferently saying, "You've lost." Prime Peak ruler struggled to his feet. He cupped his hands and said bitterly, "Young Master Qingmu's power is second to none in the entire universe. This old man is completely convinced of his defeat." After he finished speaking, he stepped back into the crowd. As expected of young Master Qingmu, he's also an invincible ruler, but ruler Prime Peak wasn't even able to take a single blow from him. Young Master Qingmu is too strong. I think even Jian Wushuang, who has been praised as the #1 genius in the universe, is far inferior to him. That's right. The reason why Jian Wushuang is so famous is mainly because of the Divine Life Palace. In terms of strength, he's definitely no match for young Master Qingmu. I'm afraid no one below the supreme level can be young Master Qingmu's opponent. Young Master Qingmu is invincible. Everyone in the crowd exclaimed in admiration. This is... The Stardust ruler was even more excited, her beautiful eyes shining with admiration. The Stardust ruler, who was standing next to the Starstreak ruler, couldn't help but smile even more bitterly. Looking at the situation, it was likely that as long as this young Master Qingmu beckoned with his finger, his Dao companion would leave him and turn to young Master Qingmu's arms. Sir Buki, didn't I tell you? Young Master Qingmu is very powerful. The Stardust ruler turned to Jian Wushuang and bragged. It's not bad. Jian Wushuang nodded. Only not bad? The Stardust ruler pouted but didn't say anything. After all, Jian Wushuang had saved her life. However, she was inexplicably angry and wished that young Master Qingmu could teach Jian Wushuang a lesson so that Jian Wushuang would no longer dare to underestimate him. On the Spratly Sand Island, young Master Qingmu's eyes surveyed the surroundings with a cold and proud expression. Is there anyone else who wants to make a move? He asked indifferently. No one responded. Only after a long time did an unparalleled ruler-like man walk out. However, this burly man was only a little stronger the prime peak ruler and was defeated by young Master Qingmu in 2 moves. Time slowly passed. During this time, a few unparalleled rulers walked out of the crowd, including the geniuses of the other 2 clans and Su elders, who wanted to ask for advice from young Master Qingmu. As expected, these famous and invincible rulers in the desolate area of the universe couldn't even last 3 moves before being defeated by young Master Qingmu and becoming his stepping stones. This showed how powerful and invincible young Master Qingmu was. After 2 hours, no one dared to challenge young Master Qingmu. No one else? Then this soil of breath belongs to me. A look of disdain flashed across young Master Qingmu's indifferent expression. He immediately turned around and walked toward the high platform to receive the breathing earth. A bunch of useless chickens and dogs. Young Master Qingmu shook his head in his heart. Seeing this, the head of the Feng family quickly took out a palm-sized piece of soil from his interspatial ring. Young Master Qingmu, who would be a match for you at the ruler realm? He smiled apologetically and pushed the breathing earth forward, saying, "Venerated youth, this is the soil of breath." Young Master Qingmu nodded, a hint of satisfaction flashing through his eyes. He reached out and took the soil of breath. In the crowd, when everyone saw this scene, a hint of envy flashed in their eyes. Young Master Qingmu was already powerful to begin with, and now that he had this piece of breathing earth, he was like a tiger that had grown wings, his strength rising to another level. At this moment, no one noticed that after the breathing earth was taken out, a young man in a black robe and a white antelope mask among the crowd had a flash of fear in his eyes. There is indeed the innate third earth qi in the breathing earth. Jian Wushuang felt the strange movement from the ancient bronze cauldron in his interspatial ring, and an irrepressible joy flashed in his eyes. He had been searching for thousands of years and finally found the third earth qi, the only missing qi among the innate 5 elements qi. As long as he could obtain the third earth qi, he would be able to truly open the ancient bronze cauldron. The next moment, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and stepped out of the crowd. He said indifferently, "Hold on." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd turned to look at Jian Wushuang. What? This included young Master Qingmu, who was on the high platform. His right hand, which was reaching for the breathing earth, stopped. He also turned his head and slowly looked at Jian Wushuang. "You want to challenge this lord?" He sized up Jian Wushuang, frowned, and said in a cold tone. This person had his face covered and didn't make a move before, but he spoke up just as he was about to get the breathing earth. A hint of displeasure flashed through young Master Qingmu's heart. Jian Wushuang's expression did not change, and he asked calmly, "Can't I?" Young Master Qingmu's eyes narrowed, and a cold smile gradually appeared on his face. "Fine, then I'll do as you wish." Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, the universe limit true treasure, the godly demon halberd, that he had put away in his interspatial ring, reappeared in his hand. At this moment, everyone asked in confusion, "Who is this person? Challenging young Master Qingmu? Is he looking for death?" The ones who challenged the young master before were all famous unparalleled rulers of the universe's desolate star fields. This person isn't famous, so how can he be qualified to challenge the young master? How can any random person challenge young Master Qingmu? Everyone present shook their heads. Even the Stardust ruler's face was filled with anxiety as he hurriedly shouted, "Sir Buki, what are you doing?" Back then, although Jian Wushuang had saved them and killed those who had pursued them, that person had only been a peak ultimate ruler. How could he compare to ruler Qingmu? Just as he was about to pull Jian Wushuang back, Star-Lord stopped him and shook his head. "Stardust, since Sir Buki isn't convinced by young Master Qingmu, then just let him be. Why should we meddle in his business?" As she said this, the Stardust ruler's eyes flickered with derision. The Stardust ruler turned to look at her, and his expression instantly froze. Was this still the kind, playful, and innocent wife he knew? "Stardust, what nonsense are you talking about? What did he mean by being a busybody? Don't forget, Sir Buki is our savior." Taking a deep breath, The Stardust ruler looked at the Starstreak ruler as if he was looking at a stranger. Stardust, I think you've been bewitched by that young Master Qingmu. You! The Starstreak ruler wasn't convinced. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but when he saw the Stardust ruler's expression gradually turn cold, he couldn't help but avoid his gaze and snorted. So many people challenged young Master Qingmu, but he didn't do anything to them. Sir Buki will be fine, so don't worry. A hint of hesitation flashed across the Stardust ruler's face when he heard this. When he saw young Master Qingmu walking down the platform with the divine demon halberd in hand, he knew that he was no longer able to stop this battle. He could only sigh and say, "Let's hope so." On the high platform, young Master Qingmu looked down at Jian Wushuang from above and said expressionlessly, "I don't care who you are or where you're from. Listen up, the rules are the same as before. If you can take 3 of my moves, I'll consider you the winner." Jian Wushuang looked at him indifferently and said, "Then hurry up. I'm in a hurry." In a hurry? When young Master Qingmu heard this, he was so angry that he laughed. What did this person take him, the number 1 genius in the desolate area of the universe, for? This lord thinks you're rushing to die. Young Master Qingmu snorted coldly. He held the halberd with both hands and ruthlessly chopped down at Jian Wushuang. This halberd strike was made by young Master Qingmu in anger, and it was even more ferocious than before. It directly shattered the void, and the phantom of the demonic phoenix danced wildly. However, prepare for the second move. Jian Wushuang lifted his eyelids slightly and used his divine power to flick a finger. In an instant, the divine power that had transformed into the power of a great Tao circulated in a terrifying manner. It covered Jian Wushuang's fingertips and flicked toward the god-demon halberd that was coming at him. Clang! As if he could crush the mountains and seas with a finger, the ferocious divine demon halberd let out a mournful wail and was sent flying after being flicked by Jian Wushuang. Young Master Qingmu's body trembled and he retreated 3 steps. He circulated all the divine power in his body and finally managed to suppress the huge force coming from the divine demon halberd. In an instant, young Master Qingmu's expression was uncertain. He stared at Jian Wushuang for a moment before he coldly said, "No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. So you're relying on your own ability." After a pause, he sneered and continued, "However, I only used 30% of my strength in that strike." 30%? Jian Wushuang shook his head. How would young Master Qingmu feel if he knew that he had not even used 1% of his power? Although he was still in the ruler realm, whether it was the divine power that could be transformed into the power of a great Tao or the divine power and supreme treasures, he was far from what a ruler could compare to. No matter which unparalleled ruler they were just ants that Jian Wushuang could casually crush. Even the 9th Kulpa King, who was widely acknowledged as the number 1 in the ruler realm, or Qiulong, who had fallen from the ruler realm, couldn't last more than 3 moves in front of Jian Wushuang, let alone young Master Qingmu. The divine power of a ruler and the divine power of his great Tao were not on the same level. The second move. Die! Young Master Qingmu coldly shouted. He no longer suppressed his strength, and his unparalleled ruler cultivation erupted. In an instant, a strong wind rose and roared, forming a vortex storm. Standing in the center of the maelstrom, young Master Qingmu was like a god that had descended from the heavens, so brilliant that it was impossible to look at him. Secret skill, heavenly punishment. Boom! In an instant, the platinum-colored divine demon halberd in his hand suddenly changed. Fine vein-like patterns covered the halberd, and young Master Qingmu ruthlessly stabbed it into the sky. He directly guided the power of heaven and earth, causing countless divine lightning to descend. In the end, the divine lightning landed on the divine demon halberd and formed a terrifying lightning bolt similar to the ancient thunder dragon. The surrounding people were all shocked. So this is the true strength of young Master Qingmu. Young Master Qingmu's true strength is so terrifying. It seems that young Master Qingmu is really angry. This masked man's life is over. Seeing this, the Stardust ruler's expression turned anxious. He shouted repeatedly for Jian Wushuang to dodge. As for the Star Lord, After a flash of worry for Jian Wushuang, his expression turned into a deeper admiration for young Master Qingmu. It would be great if my husband was such an expert. She was secretly envious. Go to hell, young Master Qingmu sneered. Boom! In an instant, the terrifying sacred thunder struck at Jian Wushuang with a destructive power. Prepare for the third move. However, Jian Wushuang's expression was still calm. He merely flicked his sleeve in the face of the terrifying divine thunder that shocked everyone. This sleeve was extremely light and did not seem to have any power. It only made people feel as if the sleeve had thrown out mountains, water, all the things in the world, the Tao and nature. Wang. The terrifying divine thunder hit Jian Wushuang's sleeve, and it rippled like a stone dropping into the water. The next moment, this divine lightning was actually sent flying. With a turn, it flew at a high speed and crashed toward young Master Qingmu with even more terrifying power. How is this possible? Young Master Qingmu's expression instantly changed, and he wanted to wave his halberd to block. However, this divine lightning directly smashed into young Master Qingmu's chest. Bang! A terrifying power exploded, and a huge, turbid mushroom cloud rose above the island. Cough, cough, cough. In the huge mushroom cloud, young Master Qingmu's uncomfortable cough sounded. Immediately after, everyone saw the originally handsome and divine young Master Qingmu fall from the sky and crash onto the ground. However, at this moment, he was like a god who had fallen into the mortal world. His black hair was all blown up, and his clothes were blown to pieces, revealing his charred chest. He was in an extremely sorry state. In an instant, everyone froze and turned into stone. Damn it! In the next moment, Ruler Qingmu rose from the ground and stared at Jian Wushuang with a livid expression. Since he was young, he had been a proud son of the heavens, favored by the heavens and earth. His cultivation path had been smooth and smooth. He was born with a Tao fruit, and he had obtained the demon phoenix bloodline on a casual trip. Even if he broke through a realm, he could make a limit true treasure recognize him as its master. No matter where he, young Master Qingmu, went, he was always greeted with praise and admiration. Due to all kinds of encounters, he had become extremely conceited. He was so conceited that he thought that no one below the Supreme Being level in the entire universe was his match. Even Jian Wushuang, who was rumored to have killed a Supreme Being and was crowned as the #1 genius in the world, was only slightly worthy of his attention. However, today, he was easily defeated by a masked man who had appeared out of nowhere. The pride and conceit that he had cultivated for tens of millions of years were trampled under his feet and ruthlessly trampled on. This was an embarrassment that he had never experienced before. Waves of monstrous anger surged in his chest, wanting to burn him to ashes. The next moment, damn it, damn it, damn it. You should die. The blood vessels on young Master Qingmu's forehead twisted as he roared, Devil Phoenix Transformation. Boom! In an instant, his blood began to boil, and mysterious symbols began to appear on his body. Suo. Immediately after, a pair of wings formed from flames spread out from his back. They were 10 miles wide. At his neck, 8 heads grew out in a twisted manner. The demon phoenix was a branch of the Phoenix clan. It had 9 heads and was extremely powerful. The awakening of his bloodline was still ongoing, and even more terrifying changes were happening to his body. Suddenly, are you performing acrobatics? Jian Wushuang looked at him indifferently, stretched out his right hand in his direction, and slowly spread his 5 fingers. If this young Master Qingmu was really from the Demon Phoenix royal family, Jian Wushuang would still be interested in taking a look. However, he was just a half-human, half-puppet monster. He naturally didn't want to waste his time. He had even killed a real dragon before, let alone this defective one. Come over. Jian Wushuang's 5 fingers grabbed at the void. In an instant, young Master Qingmu, who was immersed in the transformation and his divine body was undergoing various gorgeous changes, felt as if an invisible hand had grabbed his throat. The divine power circulating in his body was forcibly cut off and he flew toward Jian Wushuang. What is this? The young master struggled to speak. He felt that the divine power that was grabbing onto him seemed to be in harmony with the world. His awakened power of the demonic phoenix could not shift the power of the great Tao at all. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang grabbed his neck and lifted him up as if he was a little chick. "Why, you let me go!" The young master Qingmu, Jian Wushuang, raised his right hand in the air, flapped the wings on his back, and flapped his hands and feet. He was shocked and angry to the extreme. He still had a trump card that he had yet to use. He had yet to truly awaken the demonic phoenix state, and now he was caught by Jian Wushuang. He was extremely unwilling. "Venerated youth, 3 moves have passed. You've lost." Jian Wushuang let go of his hand and shook his head. After that, Jian Wushuang ignored him and walked toward the swelling earth on the high platform. To the current Jian Wushuang, only a supreme could really make him spirited. As for the rulers, he had no interest in killing them. This young master Qingmu boasted of his strength, but in his opinion, he was just a frog at the bottom of the well who had never even been to the depths of the universe. Unknowingly, the entire place was deathly silent. Everyone looked at Jian Wushuang in a daze. Their eyes were so shocked that they almost fell out, and their mouths were so wide open that an egg could be stuffed in. Young Master Qingmu was defeated? Unrivaled in the wildlands, with the title of Junior Venerable, the one bestowed with the title of Heaven's Son, Junior Venerable Qingmu, was defeated just like that. They looked at Jian Wushuang in shock. From the beginning to the end, Jian Wushuang had only used 1 finger, 1 sleeve, and 1 grab. Everyone could see that Jian Wushuang had dealt with it easily and had a lot of strength left. The Stardust ruler's expression was one of shock and disbelief as he muttered, "Impossible, absolutely impossible. Young Master Qingmu is an invincible existence. He can't be defeated. Give me the soil of breath," Jian Wushuang said to the head of the Feng family as he stepped onto the high platform. The head of the Feng family's heart trembled when he heard this, and a troubled look flashed across his face. Everyone knew that the breathing earth was already in young Master Qingmu's possession. The so-called rules and competition were just a formality to him. However, the Feng family's master didn't expect that Jian Wushuang, an uninvited guest, would come out of nowhere and easily defeat young Master Qingmu. If he were to hand over the soil of breath, he would undoubtedly offend the Qing clan. The Green family didn't just have one young Master Qingmu. That was a true ruler power with a ruler in charge. "I'll say this one last time. Give me the soil of breath." Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. In an instant, the head of the Feng family felt a great sense of horror as if he was on the verge of death. His body trembled violently, and he no longer dared to hesitate. He trembled as he handed over the soil of breath. Jian Wushuang took the breathing earth and a smile appeared on his face. He had finally gathered all the innate 5 elements qi. It's time to really open the ancient bronze cauldron. Jian Wushuang thought about it. He was also looking forward to what the ancient bronze cauldron would look like after it had completed the 5 elements. However, he did not notice. In the distance, young Master Qingmu's expression had already become extremely gloomy. He clenched his fists tightly, and a wave of humiliation turned into a surging killing intent that surged in his chest. There's no way this person is a ruler. No ruler in the universe can defeat me. Right? This person must be a supreme martial artist. Only a supreme martial artist's strength would be far above mine. Young Master Qingmu's killing intent madly flickered. The proud him would never admit that there was another ruler in this world who could defeat him. He, young Master Qingmu, was the protagonist of this universe, the beloved son of heaven and earth. How could he lose? Just as Jian Wushuang was about to leave planet Tianhuang, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He crushed the silk bag at his waist and shouted with a twisted expression. "So what if you're a supreme martial artist? Not even a supreme martial artist can insult me. Patriarch, please make your move." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, a white-haired elder in the center of planet Tianhuang opened his eyes and struck out with his palm from thousands of miles away. The speed of the palm was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it covered thousands of miles and continued to grow. Finally, it covered the sky and pressed down on Jian Wushuang. In an instant, the Spratly Islands split into pieces. The surrounding ocean waves rose up, and countless seawater rolled up, connecting heaven and earth and forming a turbulent water column. The people on the island scattered like birds and beasts, terrified to the extreme. Jian Wushuang, who had already flown up to the sky, narrowed his eyes. A ruler! In the next moment, the power of the great Tao in Jian Wushuang's body exploded and turned into countless sword qi that interweaved and formed a palm. It collided with the Supreme Master's palm that was coming at him with great momentum and could overturn the world. Bang! The two palms were like two worlds colliding with each other. They kept rubbing against each other, giving off deafening sounds. Boom, boom, boom. Countless terrifying forces seeped out and exploded in the air, creating a hole of 1,000 feet. The Spratly Islands were split into pieces, and a huge amount of seawater surged up, forming a huge wave that was like a giant beast opening its mouth to bite down. In just an instant, the Spratly Islands were submerged, as if it was the end of chaos. All of this seemed to have happened for a long time, but it all happened in the span of a breath. After the two giant palms collided, they both disappeared. Jian Wushuang's black clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. He took a step back and suppressed the terrifying supreme divine power that came from his hand. A ruler! Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold as he looked at the direction where the giant palm came from. There, a white-haired old man was slowly walking over. Every step he took seemed ordinary, but it was as if he was stepping on a spatial node. He crossed thousands of miles. After 3 consecutive steps, he stood in front of Jian Wushuang. This man was one of the overlords of planet Tianhuang, the Green family's patriarch, Supreme Green River. Ruler Green River had become a ruler 200 chaos cycles ago, and 100 chaos cycles ago, he had broken through to become a middle-grade ruler. Although he wasn't an advanced ruler, he was still extremely powerful. Sir, you have the body of a supreme martial artist. Isn't it inappropriate for you to bully a junior? Supreme Green River's hair and beard were all white. He sized up Jian Wushuang and said with a fake smile. Jian Wushuang was expressionless. Now that he was facing a supreme again, he was fearless even without the tarot divine sword. His only worry was that his identity would be exposed. However, from the looks of it, it seemed that Supreme Green River had already regarded him as a supreme. After thinking for a while, Jian Wushuang understood the cause and effect of this. Under the effect of the antelope mask, his aura was covered, and even a supreme could not see his level. His divine power of the Great Path was completely different from the divine power of a ruler, so it was normal that his cultivation level could not be seen. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang no longer had any fear. The fact that I didn't kill him is already giving face to you, Supreme Green River. Jian Wushuang said in a hoarse voice. He knew that since Supreme Green River mistook him for a supreme, he might as well pretend to the end. So you're saying that this old man should thank you? Supreme Green River narrowed his eyes. You can understand it that way. Jian Wushuang nodded his head indifferently. When Supreme Green River heard this, he couldn't help but burst out laughing as if he had heard something funny. Sir, you bullied my people and stole their treasures. And you still want me to thank you? This is the biggest joke in the world. At the same time, young Master Qingmu rushed over. First, he respectfully saluted young Master Green River. Then, he turned his eyes to Jian Wushuang and said resentfully, Patriarch, this is the person who snatched my soil of breath, injured me, and humiliated me in front of everyone. Patriarch, you must make the decision for me and punish this person severely. You can't let him leave. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's expression gradually turned cold. He looked at Supreme Green River and said, Green River, are you going to stop me now? Supreme Green River patted young Master Qingmu's head affectionately and asked him to step aside. He then put on a fake smile and said, Sir, you and I are both supreme martial artists. You can leave if you want to. However, before you leave, you have to return my grandson's breathing earth, his soil of breath. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but laugh out of anger. He said coldly, "Let's not talk about the fact that the soil of breath isn't his. Even if it was, what can you do even if I take it?" As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Wushuang's divine power surged, and he looked at Supreme Green River with an unyielding gaze. He was extremely overbearing. "You don't know what's good for you." Supreme Green River's face instantly stiffened. He then sneered, "Then we'll have to see if you have the strength to do so." Boom! He grabbed at the void with his right hand and took out a black 7-star demonic saber. He then slashed at Jian Wushuang. This saber move seemed casual, but after it slashed down, countless energy roared and all kinds of nomological laws were derived, filling the world. In an instant, the entire sky was filled with this blade. On the surface of the Spratly Islands, many rulers stood on the water and looked at the blade that filled the sky and dominated the world. They were all shocked. This is the power of a ruler. With Supreme Green River taking action, I'm afraid that the masked man won't be able to escape this calamity. Not necessarily. Didn't you hear what Supreme Green River said just now? This masked man is also a supreme martial artist. Everyone was discussing. In the crowd, only the Stardust ruler had a strange expression on his face. He remembered that when Jian Wushuang had saved them 5,000 years ago, he had only revealed his cultivation to be at the ultimate ruler realm. Could it be? Did Buki break through in the past 5,000 years? The Stardust ruler had a puzzled look on his face. The Stardust ruler, who was standing next to him, was stunned for a moment. Then, she said sourly, "No wonder he was able to defeat young Master Qingmu. So it turns out that he's a supreme martial artist. Humph, what kind of skill is it to bully the weak?" "Shut up." The Stardust ruler's expression changed when he heard this. He snapped, "How can we speculate and comment on the actions of a supreme martial artist? Furthermore, Sir Buki is our savior." "Stardust, if I hear you slander Sir Buki again, don't blame me for cutting off all ties with you and cutting off our relationship as Dao companions." After saying that, he turned to look at Jian Wushuang again with a worried expression, regardless of the Star Lord's expression. Above the 9 heavens, Jian Wushuang looked at the black blade light that was like a flowing galaxy and sneered, "The power of a ruler is only a so." Clang! With a flip of his right hand, the Wuxia divine sword appeared in his hand. Sundering stars. In an instant, a large amount of energy gathered in Jian Wushuang's hand and formed a sword rainbow that was nearly 15,000 meters long. This time, the star-slashing sword rainbow activated by the power of a great Tao was no longer silver. Instead, it was extremely bright and turned into a dense blue. With his improvement, the power of the astral sword technique naturally could not be mentioned in the same breath. It was much stronger than before. Slash! Jian Wushuang growled and the 50,000-foot sword rainbow suddenly slashed down, colliding with the black silk. With a loud explosion, Jian Wushuang leaped forward and closed in. Humph! Arrogant! Supreme Green River's eyes flickered as he stepped forward and slashed down. Divine Ruler Art. Seal the heavens slash. Kacha! The saber chi filled the sky and intertwined with each other, forming a net that blocked Jian Wushuang's path. Split open the sky. Split open the sky. Split open the sky. Jian Wushuang slashed out 3 times in a row, each sword full of the charm of the great Tao. The heaven-opening sword light, which was enhanced by the power of the great Tao, became sharper and sharper, tearing the saber net apart. Kill! Jian Wushuang took a step forward and exchanged thousands of moves with Supreme Green River. Clang! 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 The clash of the sword and saber created a series of sparks and terrifying energy kept exploding, causing the entire planet Tianhuang to rumble. Jian Wushuang did not hold back the divine power of a great Tao that was tens of thousands of times greater than his own. It poured out from his hand like a mountain and a river. It formed a storm of sword chi that bombarded the area. Boom! 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 Good! 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 Let's continue. Jian Wushuang could feel the majestic power coming from the 7-star demonic saber in Supreme Green River's hand. and the battle intent in his eyes surged to the extreme. He laughed out loud, and the Wuxia divine sword in his hand became more and more fierce. It had been a long time since Jian Wushuang had fought with Qiulong on the ancient path of stars. He had never experienced such a satisfying battle. In the past battles, those who were weaker than him could be crushed with a flick of the finger, or those at the supreme divine realm could only be killed by the power of the Tarot divine sword. Humph! You're too arrogant. Supreme Green River's face turned gloomier as he felt the sharp force coming from the blade. This power was not the supreme divine power, nor was it the power of a ruler. Instead, it was the power of the great Tao that had evolved after it had been refined to the extreme. The power of a great Tao was a strange power that some supreme martial artists had yet to comprehend. There aren't many people in this universe who have entered the Tao with the sword and reached the ruler level, and even fewer who have comprehended the power of a great Tao. Which one of them is this person? Supreme Green River's eyes flickered as he exchanged blows with Jian Wushuang. The mountains and seas were overturned and the divine land sank. At the same time, he was thinking quickly. The name Jian Wushuang flashed across his mind, but he quickly erased it. It was true that Jian Wushuang used a sword, but he was only a ruler. Although he had killed a supreme before, it was all thanks to the power of the Tarot divine sword. He definitely wouldn't be so powerful. Supreme divine art, 7-layer wave. Supreme Green River looked at Jian Wushuang, who was charging at him, and shouted again. The 7-star demonic saber in his hand suddenly changed. The 7-star pearls embedded in the blade of the 7-star demonic saber gradually lit up. With every star pearl that lit up, the power of the 7-star demonic saber increased by a little. Slash! Supreme Green River said coldly as he raised his saber and slashed down at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang raised his sword to block it, and the web between his thumb and forefinger couldn't help but feel numb. The power of this blade was actually twice as strong as the full force attack of Supreme Green River. However, this wasn't the end. Supreme Green River stepped on the void, and the 7-star demonic saber in his hand slashed again. The second slash, the third slash, the fourth slash. When Supreme Green River struck out with his 5th saber move, its power had increased by 5 times. Jian Wushuang couldn't take it anymore and was sent flying by Green River Supreme's saber. He crashed into the deep sea, causing huge waves and a terrifying tsunami. Forefather! Kill him! When young Master Qingmu saw this, a hint of joy appeared on his face as he shouted. He looked at the place where Jian Wushuang had fallen, and a cruel expression appeared on his face. So what if you're a supreme martial artist? I, young Master Qingmu, am the one who gathers the fate energy of heaven and earth, and is the protagonist of this era who has the protection of a ruler. Deep in the sea, Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. It wasn't that he couldn't take the divine art 7-layered waves. He could easily break them by using his divine body, eternal night, or daybreak swordsmanship. However, there was a risk of being exposed. Fine. It's time to test your power. Jian Wushuang's rapidly descending body came to a halt. He flipped his right hand, and the ancient bronze cauldron appeared in his hand. On the body of this ancient bronze cauldron, there were branches of a towering tree, flames that formed patterns, and sharp golden seals around it. There was also a torrential flood that flowed freely. Over the past 10,000 years, he had been refining the ancient bronze cauldron and had finally completed it. Now, not only could he perfectly control the cauldron, but he could also extract the innate 5 elements qi from the cauldron to attack. Bang! Jian Wushuang took a step forward and a huge pit was created in the deep sea. Then, he shot up and broke through the sea surface. Go! Jian Wushuang pushed with his right hand, and the ancient bronze cauldron immediately began to spin. It let out a chaotic sound that was like the beginning of the universe and crashed towards Supreme Green River. As for Green River Supreme, his 7th blade had already come crashing down. This blade caused the world to lose its color and the sun and moon to dim. If it was in the universe, it was enough to split several stars into nothingness. Bang! Then, the cauldron and the saber clashed. At this moment, the world turned into a dead silence. All the sound waves were drowned out by the explosion of the collision between the two. Then, something shocking happened. Infinite Region, which was billions of miles wide and the largest in the desolate area of the universe, had countless cracks in the void at the same time. A shock wave spread in all directions, crushing the land millions of miles around into nothing. Countless innocent people were killed by the shock wave. Boom, boom, boom. A storm was brewing, and the world fell into a brief darkness. When supreme martial artists fought, they could easily destroy the heavens and earth. Whoosh! Then, the ancient bronze cauldron rushed out from the center of the explosion. It didn't even wait for Supreme Green River's seventh blade to strike down and ruthlessly collided with his chest. PFFF. In an instant, Green River Supreme's divine body cracked, and his face turned sallow. He retreated 100 steps before he could dissipate the huge force coming from the ancient bronze cauldron. The bronze cauldron spun and returned to Jian Wushuang's hand. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Green River, you still want to stop me now?" Supreme Green River's expression was uncertain. He stared at the ancient bronze cauldron in Jian Wushuang's hand, and a hint of fear flashed through his eyes. This cauldron. Vaguely, he seemed to have seen this ancient bronze cauldron in some records, but it was too long ago for him to remember it clearly. Moreover, the ancient cauldron was missing a leg, and it looked different from the universe treasure he remembered, so he couldn't be sure. The next moment, he took a deep breath and coldly replied, "Your abilities are exceptional, but if you think you can leave with this, you're a little too naive." After saying that, he suddenly turned his head and looked at the void, saying, "Ruler Lai Chun, Ruler Dark North, our three great clans are bound to suffer the same fate if our lips die. We've always advanced and retreated together when facing our enemies. How long more do you want to keep watching?" As soon as he finished speaking, the void where Supreme Green River was looking at suddenly distorted. Then, with a soft sigh, two supreme martial artists stepped out of the void. The one on the left was exuding a cold aura. Every step he took turned his feet into ice, and there was frost on his brows. It was the Bei family's patriarch, Supreme Dark North. The one on the right was wearing a Taoist robe covered in dirt. He looked thin like an old beggar on the street. The blind old man. This person was the ancestor of the Lai family, Supreme Lai Chun. At the same time, he was also the one with the highest cultivation among the three great supremes. He had been an advanced supreme for many years. After the two supreme martial artists walked out, they were like Ding Fengzi who had set the storm. The turbulent mountains and rivers had all calmed down. Patriarch of the Bei family, Ruler Dark North. The Lai family's patriarch, Supreme Lai Chun. In an instant, everyone was shocked. The three great rulers are here. What kind of appearance is this? I remember that the last time the three great rulers of planet Tianhuang were here was 3 chaos cycles ago. That was when the 9 Emperor Pavilion wanted to set up a branch on planet Tianhuang. I didn't expect this masked man to attract the three great supremes. Now, no matter who this masked man is, I'm afraid he's dead. Immediately, everyone quickly discussed. The Stardust ruler's heart instantly clenched. Just as he was about to speak, he saw an elder of the heavenly sword sect appear in front of him and place a hand on his shoulder. With a solemn expression, he said, "Stardust, this old man can see that you have some history with this masked man. It's fine that you spoke up for him before, but now, if you don't want to bring great disaster to our heavenly sword sect, you should immediately sever all ties with him." The Stardust ruler's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. He gritted his teeth and explained, "Martial uncle, Sir Buki once saved my life. Please intervene and stop this battle." "Me?" The senior from the Sky Sword sect glanced at him and snorted coldly. "You really do think highly of your uncle master, but I'm nothing more than an invincible ruler. What right do I have to stop the rulers from waging war against each other? Besides, not to mention that he only saved your life, even if he saved the entire Heaven Sword sect. Now that he's in great trouble, it's already the greatest repayment for him that we don't hit him when he's down." The Stardust ruler wanted to say something more, but the nearby Starstreak ruler pulled him aside and said, "Stardust, just listen to your martial uncle. Don't cause trouble for yourself." The Stardust ruler hesitated for a moment, then lowered his head and let out a long sigh. Above the 9 heavens, the 3 supreme martial artists stood side by side. Standing on the left, the frosty-faced Supreme Dark North sighed and said, "Your Excellency, you and I are both Universe Supremes, and it was not easy for you to get to this point. It's just a piece of breathing earth. Why should we fight to the death?" After a brief pause, Supreme Dark North continued, "Your Excellency, I promise you that as long as you put down the soil of breath, you can leave at any time. We will not stop you. How about it?" After he finished speaking, the 3 great masters stared at Jian Wushuang, waiting for his answer. Jian Wushuang stood in the void and his expression was gloomy. Jian Wushuang wouldn't be afraid if it was just Green River Supreme alone. However, it would be a little troublesome if 3 great Supremes were to attack at the same time. In particular, the blind elder, Supreme Lai Chen, gave him a sense of threat that was even more terrifying than the 2 great Supremes combined. Even if Jian Wushuang had made a breakthrough, he would not be a match for the 3 great Supremes combined no matter how powerful he was. If it were in the past, Jian Wushuang might have really given up on the soil of breath and left. After all, this was not the only place in the world that had the innate earth chi. At worst, he would just find another place. However, the great clan gathering was about to begin. When all the clans gathered, Jian Wushuang would have nowhere to run. He could only confront the top forces again. Therefore, as long as he could improve his strength crazily during this period of time, he would not only have the power to protect himself but also to counterattack after the great clan gathering ended. This piece of breathing earth must not be given up. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked at the 3 supreme masters indifferently. He said indifferently, "What if I don't give up this piece of breathing earth?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. No one had expected that Jian Wushuang would still do things his own way under the pressure of the 3 great masters. "Your Excellency, have you thought it through?" Supreme Dark North sighed again, as if he felt sorry for Jian Wushuang's decision. "Dark North, why are you talking so much to him? Just kill them." Supreme Green River let out an angry laugh. The 7-star Devil Saber appeared in his hand once again, and a black light streaked across the air. "All right." Supreme Dark North shook his head and didn't say anything else. Then, a layer of frost covered his arm. The next moment, "Kill!" Supreme Green River waved his right hand, and the 7-star demonic saber in his hand turned into a stream of light again. As he slashed down, the entire planet Tianhuang was occupied by the saber, as if the heavenly river had reversed and chaos had just begun. Under this blade, heaven and earth seemed to have been refined into a line, and everyone's eyes lost all light. As for Supreme Dark North, he clenched his fist, and in an instant, the entire South Sea began to boil. Hundreds of millions of tons of seawater rolled up, went against the current, and slapped toward Jian Wushuang. The entire sea hung high in the sky. What a shocking scene. "Seal!" Supreme Dark North sighed softly. In an instant, the endless sea water that was hanging upside down in the sky and slapping toward Jian Wushuang was frozen, turning into 1,000,000 miles of snow. The entire planet Tianhuang was turned into a world of ice and snow. The power of a supreme martial artist could easily change the heavens and earth. As for the strongest expert, Supreme Lai Chen, he had been in a state of deep thought after taking a glance at Jian Wushuang. He frowned slightly and did not make a move. Instead, he seemed to be thinking about something. "Good." Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and divine light shot out 3 inches from his eyes. In the face of the world-destroying saber radiance and the ice-sealing power, he stomped his right foot heavily and soared into the sky. The ancient bronze cauldron appeared in his hand. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and looked down at the ancient bronze cauldron in his hand. He muttered to himself, "Let's release our true brilliance. Xiantian fourth fire. Burn." Boom! In an instant, the ancient bronze cauldron began to shake violently, and the flame runes on the cauldron suddenly lit up. An indescribable, terrifying, and scorching aura was being emitted from the ancient cauldron. The next moment, "Hoo!" A purple-red flame shot out of the ancient bronze cauldron. In just an instant, this monstrous flame spread out and covered 1,000,000 miles of land. It directly burned the pitch-black blade light and the ice. Flames that covered the sky and earth. The sun and the moon shone on the flames. The entire planet Tianhuang was turned into a fiery dome. This was a fire that could burn the heavens, burning cities and incinerating the heavens. It was as if the two were not on the same level at all. Whether it was the world-destroying saber light that sank the divine land or the hundreds of millions of feet of ice that gathered the water of the sea and turned it into a world of ice and snow, they all collapsed and disintegrated upon contact with the flame. At that moment, everyone was stunned. They all looked up at Jian Wushuang, dumbfounded. Standing in the middle of the fire, Jian Wushuang, who was holding the ancient bronze cauldron, looked like the Lord of Fire and the God of Fire. After breaking the two supreme arts, the flame continued to rush toward the three supreme masters in an extremely overbearing and turbulent manner. In an instant, the bodies of Supreme Green River and Supreme Dark North trembled violently, and a hint of shock and anger flashed through their eyes. He can actually use the innate fourth fire chi. This is rare. Only the skinny blind old man in a shabby Taoist robe was surprised for a moment before he returned to normal. He took a step forward, and a large amount of supreme divine power gushed out from his hands, forming a light shield that protected the three of them. The Xiantian fourth fire that was rushing over pounced on the light shield, and it kept making chi-chi sounds. For a moment, it was unable to do anything to the golden light shield. Just as the innate fourth fire burned off a layer of the light barrier, more and more supreme divine power gushed out to stop the innate fourth fire chi from corroding it. What? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and a hint of unwillingness flashed in his eyes. He had wanted to use the connate fourth fire chi to burn these two great supremes to death in one go, but it seemed that the attack of the advanced supreme Lai Chen was still not enough. However, Jian Wushuang was not discouraged. The ancient bronze cauldron already had the power to kill a supreme even before it was truly awakened. Once it collected the complete innate five elements chi, the five elements would transform into chaos. At that time, it was obvious that the ancient bronze cauldron would really have a qualitative leap. I can't kill them, but... Jian Wushuang's eyes turned slightly and looked at the terrified young master Qingmu. He sneered, "Go!" In an instant, a fire snake emerged from the endless Xiantian fourth fire chi and rushed toward young master Qingmu. He, Jian Wushuang, had never bullied anyone in his life, but it did not mean that he was a soft persimmon that could be easily pinched and bullied. This young master Qingmu had threatened to kill him time and time again, and Jian Wushuang had long been determined to kill him. Who? The fire was getting more and more intense. When young master Qingmu saw the purple-red fire snake rushing toward him, his legs trembled in fear and his face was filled with terror. You're an exalted ruler. What sort of skill is it to kill a ruler like me? If you have the guts, why don't you lower your cultivation level to a ruler and fight me? Young master Qingmu first glanced at his family's old ancestor, Supreme Green River, who couldn't even take care of himself, and then summoned up his courage and shouted, "Frog in the well." Jian Wushuang shook his head and didn't bother to talk to him. When Supreme Green River saw this scene, he immediately roared at Jian Wushuang, "If you kill Qingmu, the Green family will not rest until you die." Before he could finish, the Xiantian fourth fire chi immediately wrapped around young master Qingmu. I, Qingmu, am going to become a supreme martial artist. I am the main character of this era. How can I die here? No! Instantly, young master Qingmu's miserable shrieks came from the innate fourth fire. However, in just an instant, the miserable howls stopped abruptly. Young master Qingmu's body and spirit were destroyed and turned into ashes. In an instant, the entire place fell into a dead silence. In the desolate area of the universe, the venerated young master Qingmu, who had the title of Heaven's Chosen, had fallen. When Supreme Green River saw this, he felt as though his heart was bleeding. His expression was contorted to the extreme. No one knew that the so-called Tao fruit that accompanied young Master Qingmu and the great fortune that he possessed was actually Supreme Green River's doing behind the scenes. He was the one who had given up the Tao fruit and obtained the Demon Phoenix bloodline at a great cost from the Demon Phoenix clan. Even the divine demon halberd was something he had shamelessly promised countless benefits to get from his supreme being old friend. Everything he had done was to create an invincible heart for young Master Qingmu, so that he could be firm on the path of cultivation and break through to the supreme level. However, with this fire, the painstaking efforts that he had spent a great price and time to create were all destroyed in one day. Ruler Green River instantly went mad. Ah! No matter who you are, in this life, I, Green River, will slaughter your entire family and let you enjoy the greatest pain and torture in the world. Supreme Green River roared. You? Jian Wushuang sneered and said, I'm leaving today. None of you can stop me. As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Wushuang took a step forward and immediately shot out of planet Tianhuang. Jian Wushuang withdrew the endless flame back into the ancient bronze cauldron like a divine sword returning to its sheath. After the innate fourth fire returned to the ancient bronze cauldron, the entire South Sea disappeared. The hundreds of millions of tons of frozen seawater evaporated, turning the entire ocean into a bottomless pit. The sky was filled with water vapor after the seawater evaporated, making it difficult to see clearly. You want to run? Supreme Lai Chen furrowed his brows as he coldly replied, I'd like to see who you are, you cowardly rat. Heavenly eye open. Supreme Lai Chen wiped his eyes with his right hand, and his eyes, which had only been white, suddenly lit up with an endless red light. Under this gaze, Jian Wushuang, who had already fled far away, seemed to be seen through. Whether it was his cultivation realm or his true appearance, everything was seen through. In the next moment, Supreme Lai Chen's body trembled, and his calm expression instantly changed. He couldn't help but exclaim, He's a ruler! As soon as he finished speaking, the entire hall was shocked. It was as if a bomb had been dropped, and everyone was in an uproar. What? Ruler level? A ruler fighting a ruler? Are you sure? The masked man who defeated young Master Qingmu with a snap of his fingers, suppressed Green River and Supreme Dark North, and fought against three great rulers for so long is only at the ruler realm. There's such a powerful ruler within the cosmos? At this moment, everyone went crazy. Their eyes were so shocked that they almost fell out. They were extremely terrified. However, this was not the end. Supreme Lai Chen continued, If I'm not wrong, he's Jian Wushuang. Boom! As soon as his words fell, it was equivalent to dropping a heavy bomb in everyone's hearts, setting off a stormy wave. Supreme Dark North and Supreme Green River, who had already paled, trembled once more and said in disbelief, What? He is Jian Wushuang. The next moment, the three of them looked at each other, and their faces were filled with ecstasy. Ha 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 ha. The Jian Wushuang that the entire universe is looking for has been found by us. The eyes of the three men were filled with greed. Jian Wushuang was a famous name in the universe. Only by killing Jian Wushuang would one be able to obtain the identity of an outer disciple of the Dragon Clan and enjoy the eternal protection of the Dragon Clan. Other than that, there were also bounties from the other four top powers, such as billions of universe origin stones, resources from the 5-star fields, and so on. Other than that, there was also the Tarot Divine Sword that all the other races coveted. It was an unrivaled treasure that was truly famous in the universe. Including the ancient bronze cauldron that Jian Wushuang had just used, it was obviously extraordinary, far beyond the existence of a universe treasure. There were simply too many benefits. Thinking of this, the three great masters went crazy. Catch up and kill Jian Wushuang. Bang! The three of them took a step forward and all of them burst out with their supreme divine power, shooting toward Jian Wushuang. Damn it! Jian Wushuang turned his head to look at the three great masters, and his expression suddenly became so gloomy that it could drip water. He had never expected that Supreme Lai Chen would have a pair of heart's-eye heavenly pupils that could see through the illusions of the world. Now, it was probably impossible for him to hide his identity again. Fine. Since you like to chase after me, I'll give you a big gift. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand to touch the hilt of the Tarot Divine Sword that was hidden behind his black robe. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Whoosh! In the next moment, Jian Wushuang took a step forward and shot toward the galaxy. Ha ha ha! Jian Wushuang. You came to me and now you want to escape? The three great masters looked at each other and laughed. At that moment, even Green River Supreme, who had just experienced the pain of losing his grandson, had long forgotten the pain. In his eyes, there was only greed for the reward and the treasures that Jian Wushuang had on him. Whoosh! 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 The three of them followed closely behind and soon disappeared into planet Tianhuang. On the Spratly Sand Island, everyone watched the four of them leave with their mouths wide open, unable to come back to their senses for a long time. It was not until a long time later that they heard the sound of people swallowing their saliva in unison. Did you guys hear what Supreme Lai Qin just said? The masked man is Jian Wushuang. I heard that Jian Wushuang became powerful because of the Tarot Divine Sword. He didn't even use the Tarot Divine Sword just now, but he was able to fight against three great supremes. It seems that the universe has seriously underestimated Jian Wushuang's power. I said before that young Master Qingmu could easily defeat Jian Wushuang. Now it seems that I was too short-sighted and ignorant. A ruler who had previously said that young Master Qingmu could suppress Jian Wushuang said with a bitter smile. Jian Wushuang is the real #1 heaven's favorite in the world. He's overpowered everyone in his generation. Young Master Qingmu, you're far from that. More people looked at Jian Wushuang's disappearing back with awe and envy. They were all ultimate rulers, but Jian Wushuang's strength was far from theirs. It was only at this moment that they finally believed that there really were existences in the universe who weren't even at the ruler realm but were able to contend with supremes. On the other side of the Spratly Islands, the Star Rhythm ruler was in a daze. When Jian Wushuang defeated young Master Qingmu, she thought that Jian Wushuang was just bullying a junior because of his cultivation. Now that she knew that Jian Wushuang was also in the ultimate ruler realm, the invincible illusion and worship she had for young Master Qingmu instantly shattered. It turns out that he is Jian Wushuang. The Starstreak ruler muttered to herself. Stardust, comparing that young Master Qingmu to Jian Wushuang is like comparing a grain of rice to the bright moon. You have eyes but no pupils. The Stardust ruler sighed and looked at the place where Jian Wushuang had disappeared. His eyes were filled with longing. This is how a man should be. Outside planet Tianhuang, Jian Wushuang turned into a ray of light and sped forward. The three great supremes, Lai Chen, Green River, and Dark North, also turned into shooting stars and followed closely behind. Lai Chen, if we force Jian Wushuang into a corner, he'll definitely use the Tarot Divine Sword. We'll have to rely on you to stop him then. Supreme Green River's eyes flickered. Supreme Lai Chen nodded his head and sneered. As we all know, Jian Wushuang can only use the Tarot Sword once. I'll use the Death Substitution Talisman to block it. With that, he flipped his right hand, and a person with the same appearance as him appeared. There was a yellow talisman on the insignificant person's forehead. It was enough to block a fatal blow for him. It was because of the presence of the scapegoat that the three of them dared to pursue Jian Wushuang without any worries. Supreme Green River smiled when he saw this. He then looked at Jian Wushuang and shouted, Jian Wushuang, you little thief, surrender now. Hand over the Tarot Divine Sword and the ancient bronze cauldron, and I'll spare your life. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang looked at Supreme Green River as if he was looking at a fool. Then, without saying a word, he continued flying forward. He remembered that there was a backtrack place not far away from planet Tianhuang. The space-time there was chaotic and the void was cracked all year round. It was the perfect place for him to use his trump cards. Jian Wushuang, this little thief, is leading us to the place of backtrack. Lai Chen and the other two were Universe Supremes, so they were not stupid. After thinking for a while, they guessed Jian Wushuang's intention. Humph, the little thief's escape route is just what I wanted. If we kill Jian Wushuang there, the remaining divine power fluctuations will immediately cause chaos in the void storm. No one will know that we killed Jian Wushuang and took the Tarot Divine Sword. As a result, the people on both sides each had their own ulterior motives, and they continuously approached the place of backtrack with a tacit understanding. After the time it took for 3 incense sticks to burn, a whirlpool made up of countless broken stars and meteorites appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang suddenly stopped and turned to look at the 3 great masters. At the same time, Jian Wushuang quickly thought of countermeasures in his mind. Among the 3 great rulers, the advanced-level Supreme Lichun was the strongest, followed by the middle-level Supreme Green River, and the weakest was Supreme Dark North. If Jian Wushuang wanted to escape, he would have to find a way to kill one of the Supreme Martial Artists. Otherwise, if the 3 Supreme Martial Artists worked together to cast a spell, even if he had the Tarot Divine Sword, he would only be defeated. If we use the Tarot Divine Sword to kill Supreme Blazing Owl first, it'll be too risky. It's very likely that we won't be able to kill him. Instead, we'll be attacked by the other 2 great Supremes. Jian Wushuang was deep in thought. Ever since he had used the Tarot Divine Sword, he had killed the Black Eagle ruler and the others, but they were all beginner-stage Supremes. As for whether he could kill senior Supremes like Supreme Lichun who were at a higher stage, he was really uncertain. In that case, why don't we first use other divine abilities to hold off Supreme Blazing Owl and Supreme Dark North, then kill them in a compromise? Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed and a cold killing intent surged in his eyes. He locked his gaze on the face of Supreme Green River, who was charging toward him. First, kill Supreme Green River. At this moment, the 3 Supreme Martial Artists who were following closely behind arrived together. Ha ha ha, Jian Wushuang, you little thief. You really know how to bury yourself. Supreme Green River stood in the middle and sized up Jian Wushuang from head to toe. A hint of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. As for Supreme Dark North and Supreme Lichun, they took a step forward and blocked Jian Wushuang's path of retreat. Then, they casually waved their hands and created a space of their own. Jian Wushuang, you little thief. I've said that I will kill you today. Go to hell. Supreme Green River let out a maniacal laugh and took the lead to attack. The 7-star demonic saber reappeared in his hand, and a monstrous demonic might swept out in all directions, shattering the starry sky. If the heavens want them to die, they must first make them wild. Green River, the one who should die today is not me, but you. After Jian Wushuang finished his words, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Innate divine ability. Life intimidation. Boom! In an instant, a suppressive force from the depths of the soul of a higher life form descended and enveloped the 3 rulers. Go, Bronze Cauldron! Jian Wushuang turned his right hand and the ancient bronze cauldron appeared. With a spin, it released a large amount of innate 4th fire again. The Xiantian 4th grade fire chi was like a burning prairie in an instant, forming an earth-shattering incinerating aura that surged towards Supreme Lichun. Jian Wushuang, your small cauldron is extraordinary. The innate 4th fire in it is enough to pose a threat to ordinary Supreme Martial Artists, but it's far from enough to deal with me. Supreme Lichun shook his head and casually waved several light shields to block the blazing flames. Jian Wushuang ignored him. He turned his right hand again and the Wuxia divine sword appeared in his hand. Eternal Night appear. In an instant, the Wuxia divine sword disappeared inch by inch, starting from the tip of the sword. Chi chi chi. Wisps of pitch-black mist gushed out from the bottom of Jian Wushuang's feet and shot towards Supreme Dark North. They formed a huge black ball that wrapped around him. Within the sphere, a slithering power began to appear. It was as if a pair of invisible hands had begun to strip away everything that belonged to Supreme Dark North. In the end, Jian Wushuang looked away and took a deep breath. Then, he pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword from his back inch by inch. With the appearance of the Tarot Divine Sword, a brilliant sword pressure that could destroy the heavens and earth, shake the 9 heavens and 10 lands, and suppress all the races in the universe appeared between the heavens and the earth. Sharp, overbearing, evil, and destructive. No words could describe how terrifying this sword pressure was. Even Supreme Green River, who was a universe supreme, couldn't help but feel his eyelids twitch and a chill run down his spine when faced with this brilliant sword pressure. Is the killer move me? Supreme Green River narrowed his eyes and let out a cold laugh. Jian Wushuang, you can only use the Tarot Divine Sword for one attack. Let's see what you can do after this attack. So what if it's his own power? It's enough to kill you, Jian Wushuang said coldly. In an instant, endless power of great Daos poured into the Tarot Divine Sword and broke the 3 seals that had covered Supreme Master Fu. In an instant, the Tarot Divine Sword truly shone with golden light. The scarlet vertical eye on the hilt of the sword suddenly opened. Daybreak! Jian Wushuang shouted in a low voice. Crack! A ray of golden light appeared and connected the sky and the stars into a line. Jian Wushuang's entire body disappeared as he merged with the Tarot Divine Sword. With an extremely fast speed, he swept toward Supreme Green River. At this moment, all the stars in the sky lost their color, and the entire place of backtrack stopped spinning. The void shattered like glass, and countless cracks appeared. Immortal radiance sprinkled down and illuminated the world. Previously, Jian Wushuang had used his ruler's divine power and Wuxia divine sword to activate the Tarot Sword Principle. However, this Daybreak Sword Principle was activated by the Tarot Sword and the power of Great Tao. Its power had increased by several levels. As Jian Wushuang flew across the starry sky, it was as if the endless night had been torn apart by a bolt of divine lightning. The entire sky was suddenly torn into cracks. Supreme Green River's pupils immediately contracted as he thought to himself, how can this Jian Wushuang be so terrifying? He's on par with me without using the Tarot Divine Sword, but even I feel threatened when he uses it. After using the Tarot Divine Sword, he would probably be able to kill any supreme existence in any universe that was below the level of an advanced supreme. If this kid becomes a supreme martial artist, wouldn't that mean that even top-tier supreme martial artists wouldn't be able to do anything to him? Supreme Green River couldn't help but be startled by his own conjecture, and he felt his scalp go numb. How could such a heaven-defying monster be allowed to exist in this world? Green River, die! Jian Wushuang's bone-chilling voice came from the golden thread that was flying at a high speed. Supreme Green River suddenly raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang. Then, he suddenly burst out laughing and said, Jian Wushuang, you are indeed the most talented expert in history. With the Tarot Divine Sword in your hand, you even have the power to kill me. After a pause, he shook his head and said, it's a pity that I've already predicted that you'll be the first to kill me. With a wave of his sleeve, a straw doll with a yellow talisman on it suddenly appeared in his hand. This scarecrow was none other than the death substitution talisman that Supreme Lai Chen had used to block a life-and-death crisis. Go! With a push of his right hand, Supreme Green River sent the straw doll flying toward Jian Wushuang. However, a shocking situation occurred. Bang! The scarecrow was ruthlessly torn into countless pieces the moment it touched the Dawnbreak Sword Light. However, the Dawnbreak Sword Light didn't show any signs of being worn down as it once again charged toward Supreme Green River. In an instant, the wild and arrogant laughter on Supreme Green River's face froze. What's going on? The next moment, he suddenly turned his head and glared at ruler Lai Chun, who was trapped in the sea of flames but was still dealing with it with ease. He was shocked and furious to the extreme. Lai Chun, you tricked me? Before he could finish, the Daybreak Sword Ray had already pierced through his chest. The sharp and domineering Tarot Sword Chi directly crushed his undying ruler divine body. Behind Supreme Green River, the golden light gradually dissipated, revealing Jian Wushuang's black-robed, black-haired figure. Jian Wushuang held the Tarot Divine Sword and panted slightly. Ah! Supreme Green River lowered his head and looked at the hole in his chest. Then, he let out an angry roar and started to disintegrate inch by inch from his feet. In the end, his entire body was like a fortress built on the beach. He instantly collapsed and shattered, disappearing from the world. A supreme martial artist of a generation had fallen. On the other side, Supreme Lai Chun, who was deep in the sea of flames, had a fake smile on his face. Idiot, that death substitution talisman is this old man's second life. How can I really let you use it? Besides, A treasure like the Tarot Divine Sword is naturally better for me to enjoy alone. The old and dirty starry sky Taoist robe on his body suddenly brightened up like a pearl that had been dusted off and released the brilliance that originally belonged to him. Supreme Lai Chen's expression was sinister as he walked out of the sea of flames. The raging flames actually couldn't hurt him in the slightest. In just a few seconds, he walked out of the endless sea of fire as if he was taking a stroll in his garden. He looked at Jian Wushuang, twisted his neck, and said with a smile, "Jian Wushuang, now that you've finished using the Tarot Divine Sword, what else do you have to stop me?" Jian Wushuang squinted at Supreme Lai Chen without saying a word. Although this man seemed to be a man of few words, he was in truth an extremely vicious person. He had lived with Ruler Green River for dozens of chaos cycles, and yet he had been able to kill him so easily. He truly was formidable. If Supreme Green River had not trusted this man so much and not used any other means, Jian Wushuang might not have been able to kill him so easily. "Ruler Lai Chen, what a good plan," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. No one could tell if he was mocking or praising him. In the land of Backtrack, Supreme Dark North was still trapped in the Eternal Night Kingdom. In the vast starry sky, only Jian Wushuang and Supreme Lai Chen were left. Supreme Lai Chen chuckled, not minding it in the slightest. Jian Wushuang, a wise man, submits to circumstances. In the face of absolute power, whether it's your so-called overwhelming talent or the Tarot Divine Sword in your hand, they're just like a dream. They'll shatter at the touch. He stroked the beard on his chin and smiled with confidence, as if he knew everything and had the pearl of wisdom in his hand. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm. He knew that his greatest enemy had always been Supreme Lai Chen. Whether it was the fallen Supreme Green River or the Supreme Dark North who was still trapped in the Eternal Night Kingdom, Jian Wushuang wasn't 100% sure that he could kill them. However, if he wanted to leave, they definitely wouldn't be able to stop him with their skills. Only Ruler Lai Chen was left. The gap between him and Supreme Lai Chen was simply too great. An ultimate ruler and a high-ranked supreme were a full realm apart. Moreover, the difference between these few realms was so great that it was like the difference between cloud and mud. Supreme Lai Chen didn't mind Jian Wushuang's silence and continued, "Jian Wushuang, I'm wasting my breath on you because I don't have the intention to kill you. I'm giving you another chance. You have to be clear about this." "Oh." Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Supreme Lai Chen glanced at Jian Wushuang and said, "Jian Wushuang, I have to say that your luck and talent are the best in this era. It can even be said that you have been at the top since the birth of the universe. Perhaps only the number one genius of the universe 100,000 chaos cycles ago, the East Boundary, can be compared to you." After a short pause, Supreme Lai Chen suddenly changed the topic and grinned. "Jian Wushuang, if I'm not wrong, the ancient bronze cauldron you used before was the Wushu chaotic cauldron you used in the East Realm 100,000 chaos cycles ago, right?" A hint of irrepressible envy flashed across Supreme Lai Chen's face as he said this. Wushu chaotic cauldron? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was shocked. This was the first time he had heard someone mention the origin of the ancient bronze cauldron. He had long found it strange that the power displayed by the ancient bronze cauldron was not any weaker than the Tarot Divine Sword. Logically speaking, it should definitely be one of the most famous treasures in the universe. "Jian Wushuang, you don't have to play dumb. Although I'm blind, I'm not blind. There are only 2 or 3 items that can control the primordial chaos 5 elements qi. The only one that has such power is the Wushu chaotic cauldron. However, it seems that you haven't completely awakened the Wushu chaotic cauldron yet. Otherwise, you should be able to directly transfer the chaotic force." Supreme Lai Chen shook his head. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. Supreme Lai Chen was most likely right. The ancient bronze cauldron he had obtained from Qiulong was the Wushu chaotic cauldron that the East Realm possessed 100,000 years ago. At the same time, Jian Wushuang also understood why Supreme Lai Chen had delayed killing him. It was likely that Supreme Lai Chen had seen that he had the Wushu chaotic cauldron and subconsciously thought that he had also obtained the inheritance of the East Realm. He wanted to find out more about the burial place of the East Realm from him and obtain more benefits. Supreme Lai Chen's greed had far exceeded his expectations. All right, I'm done. Jian Wushuang, I'm running out of patience. Hand over the tarot sword, the Wushu chaotic cauldron, the tarot sword manual, and the other opportunities. As long as you're obedient, this old man can take you in as a servant. Although you'll become this old man's eternal slave, you'll still be able to live. Supreme Lai Chun said as he stretched his neck. What if I don't tell you? Jian Wushuang looked at him and answered. Hee hee. Supreme Lai Chun smiled faintly, a hint of mockery appearing in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, you overestimate your power and underestimate me. The gap between an advanced supreme and an ultimate ruler is far beyond your imagination. No matter how strong your superpower, divine power, or supreme treasure is, you are just an ant in my eyes. After saying this, Supreme Lai Chun paused for a moment before continuing. Jian Wushuang, it's a pity that you don't know that you have nowhere to go. Fine. I'll show you my ability first. Supreme Lai Chun shook his head and casually flicked his finger at Jian Wushuang. Bang! As he flicked his finger, tens of thousands of rules evolved and turned into all kinds of rules of the Great Tao. They mixed together and formed an extremely strong power. In an instant, the void shattered and countless wormholes exploded. It was majestic and did not seem to exist in the mortal world. In just half a breath, the finger that could destroy the starry sky was about to land on Jian Wushuang. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang put the Tarot Divine sword back into the sword case on his back, and a touch of determination flashed in his eyes. Whoosh! The next moment, the Wuxia Divine sword condensed in his hand. Since there was no path ahead, he would use the 3-foot-long Qingfeng sword in his hand to cut a path of life and death. The power of the great Tao in his body surged and slashed toward the finger. Sundering stars. A 50,000-foot blue sword energy that could pierce through the sky suddenly surged. The sword light was so brilliant that it seemed to break the entire universe. At that moment, there was only the sword light left in the universe. In the sword light, Jian Wushuang's eyes were full of fighting intent. His black hair flew in the air. Holding the blazing blue sword light, he looked like a peerless sword god. The star-sundering skill was a real killing move created by Jian Wushuang. After he comprehended the power of great Taos, it had also sublimated to the extreme and reached another level. This sword strike was full of Taoist techniques, full of charm, and the meaning of the cycle of heavenly law. This sword was a protection. What was protection? In Jian Wushuang's understanding, as long as he killed all the enemies in the world, suppressed the 9 heavens and 10 lands, and no one dared to hurt him or the people he wanted to protect, he would be protecting them. What a powerful sword. It has already stepped into the realm of Tao. Supreme Lai Chun shook his head in admiration, but there wasn't the slightest hint of fear in his eyes. It's a pity that I've also comprehended the Tao. As soon as he finished speaking, Supreme Lai Chun's finger, which was pressing down, suddenly shone with light. The brilliant sword struck his finger, but it only managed to penetrate 1,000 feet before it shattered like glass on a rock. The shattered sword light turned into countless rays and swept in all directions, shattering countless meteorites in this backtrack land. Then, it shot into the distance of the universe and disappeared. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank. Bang! Before he could think further, the finger had already hit Jian Wushuang and sent him flying, breaking the void. An ant trying to shake a tree, laughable. Supreme Lai Chun's expression didn't change as he shook his head. Husband! In the universe, Lung Rushuang's heart-wrenching scream rang out. Then he saw Lung Rushuang rush out of the heaven-suppressing monument. Kacha-kacha. Jian Wushuang's body crashed into an asteroid and pierced through it. Then he flew back for tens of thousands of feet before he gradually stopped. Several cracks appeared on his god body, and his face turned pale. Shuang-er, why did you come out? Jian Wushuang looked at Lung Rushuang and said, suppressing the boiling force in his chest. Husband, are you all right? Lung Rushuang strode over and said with a pained expression, I'm fine. Go back to the heaven-suppressing monument. Jian Wushuang shook his head at her, then fixed his gaze on Supreme Lai Chun. It had to be said that Supreme Lai Chun was the strongest enemy he had ever encountered. Oh, Supreme Lai Chun turned to look at Lung Rushuang, then at Jian Wushuang. He said with a faint smile, "Jian Wushuang, this person is your cultivation partner, right? You're quite lucky. Not only are your talents and opportunities top-notch, but even your Dao companion's talent is also not bad. It seems that she once had an opportunity." Jian Wushuang didn't answer. Instead, he took a deep breath and held the Wuxia divine sword tightly with both hands. His eyes flickered continuously as if he was thinking in secret. Immediately, again, Jian Wushuang shouted and used the daybreak swordsmanship again. Clang! A strand of golden light appeared. At first, it was only as thick as a strand of hair. However, it quickly wrapped around Jian Wushuang and transformed into a soaring golden thorn. It broke through all the darkness in the world and once again headed towards Supreme Lai Chun. The stroke was extremely powerful, and it was also Jian Wushuang's most powerful killing move. It was extremely fast, and it seemed to break through layers of raging waves. Along the way, many small planets were turned into dust, and even the space was shattered at the same time. It was extremely terrifying. Pung pung pung. A series of earth-shaking sonic booms resounded in the area where the golden light flashed. This is the tarot sword principle, right? Supreme Lai Chun couldn't help but be slightly moved. He remembered that Jian Wushuang had used the tarot divine sword to kill Supreme Green River just now. It's a pity. If you had used the tarot sword, I would still be afraid of you and be unable to take you down. But now that you can't use the tarot sword, you're just a joke if you rely on your own strength. Finished speaking. Ruler Lai Chen's eyes flickered, and a pitch-black light suddenly shot out from his eyes. "Heavenly eye open!" he shouted. In an instant, under his gaze, Jian Wushuang's movements in the golden light of dawn became extremely slow. He looked like a snail that was struggling to move toward him. His eyes could not only see through all illusions in the world, but they could also slow down his movements and find his weaknesses. The next moment, Supreme Divine Art, 9 Heavenly Finger. Supreme Lai Chun sneered and flicked his fingers 9 times in the void. It was as if he was playing a lute. In an instant, 9 divine lights formed by supreme divine power streaked across like meteors and bombarded Jian Wushuang's weak point. Pung pung pung. The golden light that Jian Wushuang had turned into trembled, and the golden light was destroyed with each hit. In the end, after flicking his 8 fingers, Jian Wushuang's daybreak sword light was completely destroyed, leaving only Jian Wushuang's figure that was charging forward with his sword. "My husband!" Instantly, Lung Rushuang, who was watching the battle from afar, felt her heart tighten. In the end, Jian Wushuang managed to get within 100 feet of Supreme Lai Chen's divine body. The 9th finger, which was as big as a mountain, finally fell and flicked on the Wuxia divine sword. A tremendous force that could move mountains and seas and grab a star river came over. Jian Wushuang's right hand couldn't hold on, and the Wuxia divine sword was sent flying. The right hand that was holding the sword was also blown to pieces. The daybreak swordsmanship was actually destroyed by Supreme Lai Chen's finger before it could even get close to him. "Jian Wushuang, do you now understand the difference between you and me?" Supreme Lai Chen's face was as cold as ice as he stared at Jian Wushuang with his black eyes and sneered without a trace of emotion. "Is that so?" At this moment, Jian Wushuang, whose face was sallow, suddenly laughed in a deep voice. In the next moment, he reached out with his left hand, and the tarot divine sword that he had been carrying on his back was unsheathed once again. It was now in his left hand. The dawnbreak was just a cover. The real killing move was the tarot divine sword. In the past, he could indeed only use the tarot divine sword once. If he wanted to use it a second time, he would have to recover for a long time. However, how could the current him be the same as before? Go to hell! A crazed look flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes as he slashed the tarot divine sword in his left hand toward Supreme Lai Chun. At that moment, the power of great Daos in Jian Wushuang's body began to circulate madly. Then, it was all poured into the tarot divine sword and devoured by it. This sword strike held nothing back and used all his strength. This sword was enough to kill a god. Bang! Instantly, the eye on the hilt of the tarot divine sword opened, and it was covered in blood. An extremely majestic aura spread out from the Tarot Divine Sword, and white thunderbolts exploded in the air. Countless sword chi and endless yuan chi energy intertwined, as if chaos was boiling. Boom! Immediately, there was an explosion as if the gate of heaven had opened and endless celestial light fell. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's figure seemed to be blurred and replaced by a figure in a green robe. He rode a sword for thousands of miles and drank from the heaven and earth. With a sword in one hand and a wine pot in the other, he opened his hazy eyes and smiled at the heaven and earth. This is the Tarot Swordmaster. Supreme Lai Chen's face was instantly filled with shock, and he could no longer maintain his composure. At this moment, the person reflected in his eyes did not seem to be Jian Wushuang, but the primordial sword master Tarot from 300 chaos cycles ago, who had suppressed the entire era and dominated the universe alone. Slash! As Jian Wushuang's deep and cold voice rang out, the sword finally struck down. Rip! In an instant, the entire universe's starry sky was split into tens of thousands of feet, as if a sword had split the sea. I thought you could only use it once? How is this possible? Supreme Lai Chen's pupils shrank. According to the news from the universe, Jian Wushuang only had the power of one strike from the Tarot Divine Sword. How could he still use the Tarot Divine Sword? How was that possible? Supreme Lai Chen didn't have time to think about it. The Tarot Divine Sword had already slashed down at an extreme speed, leaving him no time to change his move or dodge. He could only take it head-on. Jian Wushuang. Supreme Lai Chen finally understood that Jian Wushuang hadn't used the Dawnbreak swordsmanship to kill him. Instead, he had used it to close the distance between them and catch him off guard. The real killing move was the Tarot Divine Sword. At this critical moment of life and death, Supreme Lai Chen quickly flipped his right hand, and a puppet doll with a mixture of joy and sorrow appeared in his hand. Go! His face sank as his right hand quickly formed an incantation gesture. Then he tapped the space between the puppet doll's eyebrows. In an instant, the puppet doll seemed to come to life as it twisted its body and stood up in the void. Supreme Lai Chen then disappeared. Bang! The target of the Tarot Divine Sword suddenly changed. It locked onto the puppet doll and ruthlessly slashed down. In an instant, the puppet doll shattered into pieces, and the destructive power of the Tarot Divine Sword also disappeared. The celestial light gradually dissipated. Jian Wushuang, who had overused a large amount of divine power, lost his balance and almost fell from the sky. He took several divine medicines to recover his divine power, and his exhausted divine body was nourished. Only then did he feel better. A death substitution magic treasure? Jian Wushuang's face darkened. If Supreme Lai Chen didn't die from this attack, it would be difficult to kill him. Kachuk. Not far away, the void suddenly distorted, and Supreme Lai Chen's body began to gradually condense. His expression was gloomy as he stared at Jian Wushuang with a cold glint in his eyes. If he hadn't used the death substitution puppet in time, he would have died under the sword just now, following in the footsteps of Green River Supreme. Humph, Jian Wushuang. I originally wanted to spare your life. Since you are so insensible, don't blame me for being merciless and crushing you directly. I don't believe that with my means, you can persist in not telling me about the opportunities you have. Supreme Lai Chen squinted his eyes and took a step forward, causing the void beneath his feet to ripple. When he reappeared, he was already on Jian Wushuang's head. Bang! He raised his foot and stomped down on Jian Wushuang. In an instant, countless voids were annihilated. His foot turned into thousands of mountains that suppressed the surroundings. Again, Jian Wushuang's face was pale, but his eyes were cold. The power of Great Daos evolved around him and turned into various rules. Then he struck again with the Wuxia Divine Sword. The secret skill of Dragon Blood, Divine Power Ignition. Pung pung pung. Jian Wushuang, who was already dispirited, suddenly had his aura surge and soar. A sharp sword rainbow that cut through the sun and the moon and tore the sky appeared suddenly. However, after the sharp sword rainbow struck down, it was only 100 feet into the foot before it was shattered. Jian Wushuang was directly stomped down 10,000 feet into the starry sky and his divine body collapsed. My husband! At that moment, Lung Rushuang felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Her eyes turned red and wet with tears. She did not know how long it had been since she had seen Jian Wushuang in such a desperate situation. Lung Rushuang gritted her teeth when she saw Supreme Lai Chen's cold expression and his desire to pursue Jian Wushuang again. Divine power erupted from her body, and the 9-section divine whip appeared in her hand. She whipped it at Supreme Lai Chen. A mantis trying to stop a chariot, overestimating your own strength. Supreme Lai Chen looked at Lung Rushuang coldly and waved his hand. A vast force blasted out from his hand and smashed Lung Rushuang into the depths of a star. Don't worry. After I kill your husband, Jian Wushuang, I will send you to be his companion. Supreme Lai Chen snorted coldly and looked at Jian Wushuang again. Jian Wushuang's divine body, which had collapsed, instantly regenerated and his pale face turned sallow. He held the Wuxia divine sword in his right hand and stood up shakily. He looked at Supreme Lai Chen and suddenly laughed. Jian Wushuang, what are you laughing at? Supreme Lai Chen frowned as a cold glint of wind flickered in his dark eyes. In his eyes, Jian Wushuang was like a catfish jumping on the chopping board. His life or death was in his hands. Lai Chen, do you really think that I'm out of options? Jian Wushuang stopped smiling and shook his head. His eyes became calm again. Hee. Supreme Lai Chen's eyes were filled with faint mockery as he said, Jian Wushuang, let's not talk about your strength and talent. I have to admire your tenacious vitality. Therefore, no matter what the decision is today, you won't be able to walk out of the backtrack land. Is that so? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, then lowered his head and took out a jade token hanging on his waist. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Blood Wave Supreme, I owe you one more time. Bang! In the next moment, Jian Wushuang crushed the jade token on his waist. Kacha. A crack appeared on the jade token at his waist. A majestic aura that seemed to come from the primordial chaos slowly rose from the jade token. This is. In an instant, Supreme Lai Chen's body trembled violently, and a hint of shock appeared in his eyes. This aura was far above his. His power, which was enough to crush Jian Wushuang, was like the difference between a child and an adult in front of this aura. The gap between them was even greater than that between him and Jian Wushuang. Boom! Boom! This aura became more and more intense. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped in the entire backtrack land. Everything had stopped moving. Supreme Lai Chen's eyes widened as he watched this aura continue to condense, finally transforming into a handsome, expressionless black-robed middle-aged man. This black-clothed middle-aged man was hundreds of millions of feet tall, and his eyes were like mountains. Under his feet, the nearly 10,000-foot starry sky had turned into a pool of blood, dyed with a demonic red. An indescribable power surged and slapped in all directions, causing all races to submit and shaking the 9 heavens and 10 lands. He's the strongest supreme being among the top supreme beings. Blood wave. In an instant, Supreme Lai Chen's body trembled violently as he cried out in shock. The Blood Wave Supreme was one of the 5 lead supremes of the Divine Life Palace. He was second only to the unparalleled Supreme. The Blood Wave Supreme had a world-shaking cultivation. He was an epic figure who had survived the catastrophe and had fought countless battles in his life. He had once suppressed the Great Void Temple and fought with the newly promoted Emperor God, Supreme Bing Yi, for 3 days and 3 nights. He had also fought with the invincible Great Cosmos Temple's Hall Master. Finally, he had shown his brilliance in the war with the Dragon Tribe. The number of Supremes who had died in his hands could be counted with 2 hands. It could be said that as long as the invincible ruler didn't appear, the ruler Bloodwave would be able to do as he pleased in the universe. He was a true great figure in the depths of the universe. He was far from someone Supreme Lai Hong, who had to live in the desolate area of the universe, could compare to. The next moment, the ruler Bloodwave's illusory figure slowly opened its eyes and coldly glared at Supreme Lai Chun. Who gave you the right to bully the people of the Divine Life Palace? Bang! An endless pool of blood condensed and transformed into a gigantic hand that blotted out the sun as it slapped towards Supreme Lai Chun. How terrifying was a full-force attack from a top-tier supreme martial artist. This was especially so for an ultimate existence like Bloodwave, who was a top-tier supreme being. At this moment, the great Tao of heaven and earth trembled and roared. Countless voids shattered and collapsed at the same time, and the entire backtrack place exploded. Run! Supreme Lai Chen's heart instantly went into a frenzy, and he turned around to flee. However, the entire universe seemed to have frozen over. Under the full force attack of the ruler Bloodwave, a massive suction force was drawn from the palm of his hand, sending ruler Lai Chun flying toward the palm. The palm finally pressed down. Endless celestial light and starlight surged, and the palm patterns were so thin that they were almost visible. Under this palm, all sounds were silent. Bang! Supreme Lai Chun poured out all of his divine power to resist the palm. At this moment, his heart was filled with regret, and even more so, he felt extremely aggrieved. If he had known that Jian Wushuang had such a great killing move, he would not have dared to chase after Jian Wushuang even if he had 10 times the courage. Kachuk. However, it was useless to say anything at this time. This palm was the Blood Wave Supreme's full-powered attack. If Supreme Lai Chun had been a top-tier Supreme, he might have been able to resist it. However, he was only an advanced Supreme, so how could he resist the Blood Wave Supreme's full-powered attack? His feet were the first to be obliterated inch by the tremendous power of the palm. Soon after, his arms began to explode. Jian Wushuang, even if I die, I won't let you have an easy time. Supreme Lai Chun suddenly turned to look at Jian Wushuang with a resentful expression. He shouted with all his strength, "Supreme Divine Art, Blood Curse!" Bang! All of a sudden, Supreme Lai Chen's eyes exploded, and 2 streams of blood flowed out of his eyes. They twisted and condensed, and finally hung above Jian Wushuang's head, forming a huge scarlet word, "Kill!" With the word "kill" in front of him, all of Jian Wushuang's concealment techniques would be exposed. He would even be like a piece of rotten meat that would attract all the experts above the supreme realm in the surrounding 10,000 miles of starry sky. Damn it! Jian Wushuang's face suddenly turned gloomy and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Ha 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 ha! Jian Wushuang, I'd like to see how many times the ruler Bloodwave's full power attack can protect you. Boom! Ha 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 ha! Supreme Lai Chen's divine body was obliterated by Supreme Bloodwave's palm, and he laughed maniacally. Supreme Lai Chun had died. After killing Supreme Lai Chen, the power of that palm also gradually dissipated. In the end, it disappeared and returned to nothingness. Jian Wushuang stood in the void, his black hair flying in the wind, and his expression was uncertain. He didn't feel the slightest bit of joy at the death of Supreme Lai Chen. The huge kill word hanging above his head was like a bright light in the dark night, extremely conspicuous, and he had nowhere to hide. He tried to use the power of the great Tao to erase the word kill, and also tried to see if the antelope mask could cover it, but it was useless. All his methods were useless. This is going to be troublesome. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered continuously. He understood that the word kill would cause a stir among the Supremes in the entire universe and they would come to kill him. Just as Jian Wushuang was deep in thought, a burst of crazy laughter suddenly came from nearby. Ha ha ha! Jian Wushuang, I'm finally out. In the distance, the Eternal Night Kingdom continued to shatter and finally exploded. Although Supreme Dark North was in a sorry state, his face was full of joy as he rushed out of the Eternal Night Kingdom with a loud laugh. Supreme Green River, Supreme Lai Chen, how are you? Come, let's join forces and take down Jian Wushuang. We'll split the treasure. Eh? Supreme Green River? Supreme Lai Chen. In the next moment, the smile on Supreme Dark North's face froze. It was as if someone had grabbed his throat, and his face turned red. The surrounding void was in chaos, and countless cracks appeared in the void. The entire backtrack was destroyed. Where were the shadows of Supreme Verdant River and Supreme Blazing Phoenix under the starry sky? Only Jian Wushuang, who was dressed in black and had black hair, slowly turned his head and looked at him coldly. Supreme Dark North was momentarily stunned, but he still mustered his courage and asked, "Little thief Jian Wushuang, let me ask you, where are Supreme Green River and Supreme Lichen?" Jian Wushuang looked at him with a strange expression. He didn't expect that Supreme Dark North, who was the weakest among the three great Supremes that had come to kill him, would live the longest. Immediately, he faintly replied, "You guess." For some reason, a premonition welled up in his heart upon hearing this, and he hurriedly spread out his divine power to sense his surroundings. In the next moment, Supreme Dark North's expression changed drastically, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. His lips trembled as he said, They're dead." Without waiting for Jian Wushuang to answer, he took a step forward and divine power surged in his body. Just as Jian Wushuang thought that Supreme Dark North was going to take revenge for the deaths of Supreme Green River and Supreme Lai Chun, he clenched the Wuxia divine sword in his hand tightly. "Fiend! He's a fiend! Run!" Supreme Dark North roared as he turned around and fled. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared from Jian Wushuang's sight. "Ha!" Seeing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but be stunned. Then, a look of astonishment flashed across his face. Shaking his head, Jian Wushuang didn't plan to chase after him. This Supreme Dark North was only an elementary supreme, so he couldn't pose any threat to him. At most, he could spread the news about him. Now that he had the word "kill" above his head, it didn't make much difference to him whether the news spread or not. What I need to do now is to quickly find a place to recover my divine power and truly open the ancient bronze cauldron. Only then will I have the power to protect myself in the upcoming battle. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered and he quickly made a decision. Then, Jian Wushuang waved his hand and put Lang Rushuang into the heaven-suppressing monument. He then quickly left in a direction. What Jian Wushuang didn't know was that not long after he left, two divine lights appeared in the backtrack land like meteors. The divine light dissipated, revealing the figures of two supreme martial artists. This aura is the Tarot Divine Sword. Jian Wushuang was here before. One of the supreme martial artists, who was wearing a bamboo hat and carrying a knife at his waist, said in a deep voice, "That's right. It's the aura of the Tarot Divine Sword. It also contains the divine power fluctuations of Supreme Lai Chun and Supreme Green River. It seems like the two of them were killed by Jian Wushuang." A hunchbacked old woman with pimples all over her face and an extremely ugly appearance said in a hoarse voice, "Go! Jian Wushuang shouldn't have gone far. Let's chase." The eyes of the supreme being in the bamboo hat flickered as he looked around at the void. Finally, his eyes fixed in the direction where Jian Wushuang had left, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. "Look, there's a blood tunnel here. Jian Wushuang must have been hit by Lai Chen's blood curse." The two of them looked at each other. Then, they turned into two divine lights and chased after Jian Wushuang at an extremely fast speed. Very quickly, the backtrack fell into silence. Not long after, several supreme masters arrived one after another. After thinking for a while, they all smiled greedily and chased after Jian Wushuang. On a planet far away from the backtrack, a light flew down and shattered, revealing Jian Wushuang's figure. Jian Wushuang's face turned pale. He could vaguely sense that the Supremes in the desolate area of the universe were all rushing toward him. "I have to open the bronze cauldron first." Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered and his body quickly broke through the ground and sank into the depths of the earth. Then endless sword chi gushed out of his body. The sword chi was dense and spread out with him as the center, burying into the ground. After doing all this, Jian Wushuang sat down with his legs crossed. He first swallowed a few divine herbs to recover his divine power. Then, with a flip of his right hand, the ancient bronze cauldron and the soil of breath appeared in his hands. "Refine!" Jian Wushuang shouted. In an instant, wisps of black and yellow chi rose from the palm-sized swelling earth and were absorbed by the ancient bronze cauldron. Boom! In an instant, the ancient bronze cauldron let out a never-before-heard explosion. In the space of the ancient bronze cauldron, The innate five elements qi were constantly blending together and transforming into a terrifying power that could not be described with words. Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes and split his mind into two. He continuously shot out sword qi that filled the void while he continued to refine the ancient bronze cauldron and observed the changes that occurred in the cauldron. A transformation was slowly beginning. At the same time, outside the planet, whoosh, 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 streaks of powerful divine rays of light with different auras streaked across the starry sky like meteors and landed outside the area of stars. The light dissipated, revealing the figures of the supreme martial artists. The first one to arrive was the Supreme with a bamboo hat and a blade at his waist. He was a middle-grade Supreme with a powerful aura and was known as Wild Blade Supreme in the desolate area of the universe. His strength was even slightly above Green River Supreme. Beside him was an ugly hunchbacked old woman with red pimples all over her face. This old woman was not very pretty, but she was also a middle-grade Supreme martial artist, also known as Grandma Poison Flower. Her poison techniques were superb, and she had even comprehended the power of the Great Tao. She had once killed an advanced Supreme martial artist to death. Jian Wushuang is here. Supreme Master Wild Blade squinted his eyes and looked down at the star under his feet. In the center of the star, where Jian Wushuang had sunk into the Earth's core, there was a huge scarlet word, kill, that was particularly eye-catching. Hee. It seems that Jian Wushuang's treasures are going to be ours. A sinister smile appeared on Granny Poison Flower's face, and her voice was filled with uncontrollable excitement. The two of them looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with greed as they flew toward the star. Jian Wushuang, come out. I know you're here. Granny Poison Flower laughed out loud. With a pull of her hands, one of the meatballs on her hunchback suddenly exploded. Green liquid burst out, and it was extremely stinky. Then, the green liquid gathered in her hands and formed a poisonous flower. She smashed it at the place where Jian Wushuang had sunk. Boom! In an instant, the entire planet trembled, and a 10,000-mile-wide crater was created on the ground. You've hidden pretty well. Granny Poison Flower laughed nonchalantly and stepped into the ground at the same time as Supreme Wild Blade. The moment the two of them stepped on the ground, the entire land suddenly trembled slightly. As supreme martial artists, the two of them naturally had extraordinary perception. Seeing this, they couldn't help but raise their brows and let out a soft gasp. Before the two of them could do anything, the entire ground suddenly cracked open like a spider web. A sharp sword qi rainbow rose from these cracks. What's this? In an instant, the two of them were shocked and their pupils shrank. Sword qi that covered the entire mountain and the earth. Millions of streaks of sword qi streaked across the void, shattering the clouds and dyeing the entire world. The next moment, the sword qi suddenly turned around and a sharp and cold intent burst forth, shooting toward Supreme Wild Blade and Granny Poison Flower. Humph! Small tricks. Seeing this, Supreme Wild Blade sneered and pulled out the snow-white long blade hanging on his waist with his right hand. His supreme divine power gushed out. Jian Wushuang, I'd like to see how long this sword qi can hold us back. Granny Poison Flower laughed evilly as a red box appeared in her hand. Opening the box, there were nearly 10 poisonous needles of different lengths. Granny Poison Flower flicked her 10 fingers, and the poisonous needle immediately floated into the air. As she flicked her 10 fingers, it was as if there were invisible threads controlling the poisonous needle, shattering the surrounding sword qi. Just as the two of them were trapped by the sword qi, several divine lights swept over from outside the star and turned into the figures of Supremes. Oh, I didn't think that Supreme Wild Blade and Granny Poison Flower would be one step ahead of us. An evil-looking man raised his eyebrows and laughed. Beside him, a thin young man with an octopus head said, Shoo. Let these two help us to destroy this sword power, then we'll make our move. This octopus-headed young man was the current clan leader of the Demon Octopus clan in the desolate area of the universe. He had become an advanced supreme being not long ago. All right. The devilish-looking young man had a pair of narrow fox-like eyes. He nodded upon hearing this. Boom, boom, boom. On this star, countless sword chi rained down on Supreme Wild Blade and Granny Poison Flower, only to be shattered by the two. To the two of them, although the sword chi could cause some trouble, it did not pose any threat to them. After a while, the millions of sword chi in the hall were quickly destroyed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Meanwhile, Supreme Wild Blade and Granny Poison Flower were getting closer and closer to Jian Wushuang. Deep in the earth's core, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged, and the ancient bronze cauldron in front of him was undergoing the most critical change. In the space of the ancient bronze cauldron, the fourth fire chi, the high water chi, the first gold chi, the second wood chi, and the third earth chi were like 5 different forces that were constantly merging and repelling each other. The chi of the 5 elements spread and formed each other, reinforcing and countering each other. They came from the same source, but each had their own extreme power, so they couldn't merge. For example, the energy of water and fire, the energy of metal and wood, and so on. They were the most hostile forces in this world. How did this happen? Jian Wushuang furrowed his brows and kept thinking. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang could feel that more and more supreme beings were coming, and his eyes were filled with determination. Today, the chi of the 5 elements can be melted, but if it can't be melted, you have to melt it. Bang! Jian Wushuang no longer held back any divine power. He released all of it and poured it into the ancient bronze cauldron, urging the 5-element chi to merge. That feeling was as if he was trying to stuff soil into gold and iron, barbaric to the extreme. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the ancient bronze cauldron began to shake violently, letting out an embarrassing cracking sound. However, Jian Wushuang's face was filled with joy. He could feel that the chi of the 5 elements was finally showing signs of fusion under his strong urging. However, at the last moment of the fusion, a barrier suddenly appeared and blocked the 5-element chi. What is this? Jian Wushuang's face darkened. He felt a small person appear out of thin air with his divine power. This little person's black hair hung down. His face was cold, and his eyes had double pupils. His entire body was filled with a cold killing intent, causing one to feel a chill all over their body with just a glance. However, this little person's expression was numb and stiff, as if it didn't have a consciousness of its own. An imprint. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. If he had guessed correctly, this small person should be the mark left in the cauldron by the previous owner. In that case, based on what Supreme Lai Chun had said, the previous owner of the ancient bronze cauldron, which should have been called the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron, was 100,000 chaos cycles ago, the publicly acknowledged number 1 genius of the universe. The East Realm. The divine light in Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly grew. In other words, the mark of the little man was left by the East Realm. I'm afraid that the ancient bronze cauldron has tried to escape several times before. Now that the connate 5 elements chi can't be combined, I'm afraid it's all because of the mark left by the Eastern World Overlord. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth gradually curved into a cold smile. Immediately, countless divine power gushed out and wiped away the mark. To the current Jian Wushuang, even if the East Realm had come personally, he would not be afraid, let alone a mere mark left by the East Realm. Bang! With a muffled sound, the little person was instantly wiped out by Jian Wushuang. There were no more obstacles in the way of the connate 5 elemental chi, and they fused together. On the surface of the planet. Ha 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 ha, Jian Wushuang. The sword chi you left behind has been destroyed. Let's see how you can stop me now. Supreme Wild Blade casually waved his blade and destroyed the last beam of sword chi. He then opened his mouth and laughed. Then, he took a step to the place where Jian Wushuang had sunk into the earth's core. He stretched out his hand to break the ground and tried to grab Jian Wushuang. Granny Poison Flower's expression was cold. She hung her 10 poisonous needles in the air quietly. She was ready to give Jian Wushuang a fatal blow the moment he was caught. The devilish young man with long narrow eyes and the black-headed 9-clawed octopus clan's leader also gushed out their divine force and waited for the opportunity to make a move. At this critical moment, boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, An earth-shattering explosion rang out. The entire world seemed to have fallen into doomsday as it trembled madly. The earth began to crack, the mountains began to collapse, the sky began to shatter, and everything on the planet began to shatter. What's going on? Suddenly, the faces of Supreme Wildblade and the others changed. The next moment, the entire star exploded. A boundless ancient aura that seemed to transcend the chaos of the universe rose up. The entire starry sky of the universe resonated with the sound of the great Tao, as if heaven and earth were celebrating the birth of a supreme treasure. Waves of air currents spread out like shock waves. The expression on Granny Poisonflower's face, which was full of meat lumps, changed rapidly. Retreat! Supreme Wildblade and Granny Poisonflower looked at each other, then quickly retreated. They only stopped after they had retreated a few 100,000 feet. They looked at the blast with shock and doubt. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the airwaves gradually dissipated, revealing a black-haired man who was sitting cross-legged with a huge scarlet kill character above his head. He closed his eyes slightly. In front of him, an ancient bronze cauldron was spinning slowly. The chaotic aura was coming from this bronze cauldron. This is the Wuxia Chaos Cauldron? The others had not noticed anything. But the devilish young man's eyes widened and he exclaimed in shock. The next moment, not good. The Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron is in Jian Wushuang's hands. We are definitely not his match. Run, the devilish young man said quickly. All these years, he had been searching for the long-lost Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron. Although he didn't know why the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron had fallen into Jian Wushuang's hands, he knew how terrifying it was. The demon octopus clan master standing next to him frowned when he heard this. He felt that this devilish youth was making a mountain out of a molehill and casually said, Shu Yuan, I've heard of the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron before. It's indeed a great killing weapon. However, Jian Wushuang is only an ultimate ruler. We don't have to be so afraid of him, right? You don't understand. The devilish teenager shook his head and took a deep breath. Demon octopus clan master, if you want to stay, then stay here by yourself. I'll take my leave first. After saying that, the devilish young man turned around and tried to escape. At this moment, a calm voice was heard. Since you're all here, then all of you should stay. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He then looked down at the bronze cauldron in front of him. The ancient bronze cauldron had already undergone earth-shaking changes. Although it was still incomplete, a shocking image had appeared on the body of the cauldron. The sun, the moon, and the stars were hanging high above the ancient cauldron, while flowers, birds, insects, and beasts were running around. The sky was still, and it looked like a lively world-creating map. The fusion of the 5 elements formed chaos. Absorb. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang pulled out a streak of yellow primordial chaotic power from the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron. In an instant, a great horror of life and death appeared in everyone's heart. Hiss dash. What is this? Primal chaos energy. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and their hearts trembled. The devilish young man's face turned pale and his lips were trembling. 100,000 chaos cycles ago, the Eastern world's supremacy had been a mere mortal, but with the help of the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron, he had slaughtered rulers as easily as he had slaughtered dogs. But now, the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron was in Jian Wushuang's hands. How terrifying would it be? In addition to the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron, Jian Wushuang had another great killing weapon, the Tarot Divine Sword, compared to the East Boundary. Moreover, Jian Wushuang was a super perfect level special life form, had great superpowers like Daybreak and Eternal Night, and had comprehended the power of a great Tao. Jian Wushuang's terror would far exceed that of the East Realm. Run! I have to escape! The 4 supreme martial artists' hair stood on end, and they shot in different directions almost at the same time. Today, none of you will be able to escape. Jian Wushuang's voice was as cold as a glacier. A moment later, primal chaos energy viciously slammed down. Even further away, there were other supreme martial artists who were rushing over with sinister smiles on their faces. 3 days later, An earth-shattering piece of news spread from the desolate area of the universe and quickly swept through the entire universe. Jian Wushuang, who had disappeared for 10,000 years, had reappeared in the wild area of the universe and killed 9 supreme-level experts by himself. In an instant, the universe was shocked, and all the races were terrified. When the news that Jian Wushuang had killed 9 supreme divine realm experts in 3 days spread, it instantly swept across the entire universe with the momentum of a prairie fire. At first, some people didn't believe it. However, when a supreme being from the desolate area of the universe escaped in a sorry state and told them that there were no more supreme god-level experts in the desolate area of the universe, they were shocked. The entire universe was in an uproar. As a ruler, he had killed a divine realm expert. What kind of concept was this? In an instant, the entire universe was in turmoil. Many people who were envious of the bounty and planned to find Jian Wushuang retreated quickly. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's title as the #1 heaven's favorite was no longer an exaggeration. Some people even claimed that Jian Wushuang was a legend. In Cosmos Temple, the Hall Master of Cosmos Temple, He Yu, sat on the main seat, while the other supremes stood on both sides. The atmosphere was particularly heavy. "Hall Master, what should we do next?" a supreme martial artist asked in a low voice with a complicated expression. The Heiyu ruler did not say anything, and not a single emotion could be seen on his face. However, if one were to pay close attention, one would notice that the right hand of the Heiyu ruler, hidden under his black robes, was trembling. "I didn't think that this kid would become so successful." He clenched his fists tightly and his eyes were filled with unwillingness. He had planned everything and even invited the Dragon Clan to take action so that he would not be able to witness such a scene. He wanted to kill Jian Wushuang in the cradle. They had not expected that Jian Wushuang would still be able to escape even after the 6 forces had joined forces. In just 10,000 years, Jian Wushuang had grown to the point where he could kill a supreme. After recollecting his thoughts, a look of dejection appeared on He Yu ruler's face. "Hall Master, in my opinion, we might have a chance to kill Jian Wushuang. Otherwise, once he misses this opportunity, Jian Wushuang will be able to get 10 seats on the praying mats and break through to the supreme level when the universe banquet of all races begins. I'm afraid that by then, there will be no place for our Cosmos Temple in the entire universe," the supreme martial artist who had spoken earlier said in a deep voice, his eyes flickering. "Oh!" Hearing this, the brows of the Heiyu ruler twitched. With a bitter smile, he replied, "Qinggo, the 4 lead supremes of the Divine Life Palace and the newly promoted 9th Kulpa King have been keeping an eye on me. As soon as I leave Cosmos Temple, they will come to stop me. Tell me, where do you think I'll get the chance to kill Jian Wushuang?" The supreme martial artist named Qinggo smiled and said, "Hall Master, you don't have to worry. It's just Jian Wushuang not worth mentioning. Why do you need to take action? I alone am enough to suppress him." At this point, Supreme Green Dog's face was filled with confidence. This self-confidence did not come from vanity. It was because he was the 2nd most powerful person in Cosmos Temple, second only to the Hall Master. His strength as a top supreme martial artist had already reached the peak. "You?" Hearing this, Heiyu ruler fell silent for a moment. Seeing the Heiyu ruler's hesitation, the Green Dog ruler spoke up, "Hall Master, there's no need to think too much. I've analyzed Jian Wushuang's power. He's about a middle supreme. With the help of the Tarot Divine Sword and the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron, he can barely kill an advanced supreme. It all depends on the strength of the advanced supreme." Hearing this, the Heiyu ruler heaved a sigh of relief. Understanding the importance of this matter, he nodded his head and said, "That's good. Qinggo, you must bring back Jian Wushuang's head this time." "Yes." Supreme Green Dog cupped his hands, bowed, and retreated. Within the Great Void Temple, Wushu Chaotic Cauldron. The heavens are so unfair that such a universe treasure has fallen into Jian Wushuang's hands. Supreme Master Bing Ye's expression was extremely unsightly, and the gloominess in his eyes almost materialized. Jian Wushuang's opportunity made him envious. Not only did he obtain the Tarot Divine Sword, but he also obtained a treasure that was no weaker than the Tarot Divine Sword, the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron. Sir Divine Emperor, what do we do now? The palace master of the second palace also spoke with a dark expression. Supreme Bingyi took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He then said with a decisive tone, Jian Wushuang must die. Otherwise, once he successfully breaks through to the Supreme Being level and truly grasps the Tarot Divine Sword, I'm afraid no one in the entire universe will be able to stop him. The palace master of the second palace nodded in agreement and said, Hall Master, let me kill Jian Wushuang. Supreme Bing Ye's eyes flickered as he heard this. He then waved his hand and said, No, this is the last chance to kill Jian Wushuang before the feast of all races in the universe. It's of great importance, so we must kill him in one blow without any risk. Supreme Bingyi paused for a moment before his eyes suddenly turned cold. Therefore, I will kill Jian Wushuang personally this time. What? The second hall master couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this. Supreme Bingyi was a half-step unparalleled supreme and the master of a force. If he were to kill Jian Wushuang personally, he was afraid that it would set off a storm of public opinion in the entire universe. However, the second hall master didn't try to persuade him. He knew that Supreme Bingyi was already afraid of Jian Wushuang. As long as Jian Wushuang didn't die, he would be uneasy. Yes, sir. He cupped his hands and said, 9 Emperor Pavilion, Headquarters. At the round table that represented the Supreme Council, the 3 great masters, purple-haired, red-eared, and heart-slayer, were sitting at the round table. The faint afterglow shone through the glass and onto the round table, forming mottled light blocks. TSK. A perfect-level special life form with extremely high talent for cultivation and enlightenment. In addition to the Tarot Divine Sword, you've also obtained the Wuxia Chaotic Cauldron. Even I can't help but be envious of such opportunities. Supreme Heartslayer shook his head and laughed. There are only a few extreme weapons in the universe. I didn't expect Jian Wushuang to have 2. What a great fortune. The red-eared supreme martial artist clicked his tongue in wonder. Although the purple-haired youth didn't say anything, a bitter smile appeared on his eternally cold face. Supreme Heartslayer glanced at him and said, Purple-haired, now you know why I advised you not to be enemies with Jian Wushuang and the Divine Life Palace, right? Jian Wushuang is the same as the East Realm from 100,000 chaos cycles ago and Tarot from 300 chaos cycles ago. He's the one chosen by heaven who can dominate and suppress an era. In fact, he's even stronger than the East Realm and Tarot. The purple-haired youth nodded and couldn't help but sigh. He replied, It's been countless chaos cycles since someone has slain a ruler in succession with a ruler's body. I'm afraid that the major forces that attacked the Divine Life Palace must be having a headache now. After a pause, the purple-haired youth looked at Supreme Heartslayer and continued, Heartslayer, what should we do next? Do you need to help Jian Wushuang again? Heartslayer was in no hurry to answer. Instead, he squinted his eyes and looked through the glass into the distance. No need. Jian Wushuang's wings have already formed. He will have to rely on himself next. Once he experiences this tribulation, he will definitely become a god and be tempered into steel. The purple-haired youth pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, Then we'll do as you say, Heartslayer. Heartslayer laughed and did not reply. Instead, he looked into the distance with a touch of anticipation. Jian Wushuang, I'd like to see how far you can go in the end. As the news of Jian Wushuang's reappearance spread, everyone in the universe was shocked at first. Then they began to look forward to the reaction of the 6 top forces, who had great enmity with Jian Wushuang. As expected, other than the Dragon Clan, which had yet to express their stance, the other 6 powers had all sent their top experts to the desolate area of the universe to kill Jian Wushuang. What was worth mentioning was that the leaders of the Great Void Temple and the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom had personally taken action. The newly promoted Supreme God Bing Yi and the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom's Scarlet Sun Demon Master had also taken action. Both of them were half-step, unparalleled existences. Everyone in the universe could not help but sigh. They did not know whether to envy Jian Wushuang or pity him. He envied Jian Wushuang, who was only at the realm of an ultimate ruler, but he was able to stir up a storm in the entire universe. He had even attracted the real big shots in the universe and was destined to be famous throughout the ages. At the same time, he pitted Jian Wushuang for his many disasters. He had killed 9 Supremes with great difficulty and survived, but now he had to face an even more severe and terrifying situation. It should be known that the people from the major forces had already figured out Jian Wushuang's strength and even overestimated the outcome. They wanted to kill him with one blow without any accidents. And right at this moment, news finally came from the dragon race that had fallen into a state of silence. Long Qing, the leader of the 4th generation of the Dragon Clan, would come out of seclusion and head to the savage lands of the universe to kill Jian Wushuang. Who was Long Qing? Back then, the champion of the Dragon Clan's battle for the throne, Qiu Long, was defeated by Long Qing in that battle. He was stripped of his supreme being divine realm and expelled from the Dragon Clan. As soon as this news came out, the universe suddenly boiled over even more. Almost everyone was certain that Jian Wushuang would not be able to escape this time. At the entrance of the ancient path of stars, a tall and burly figure with a dignified expression and a blood qi as strong as the sun rushed out of the ancient path of stars. Fortunately, I finally got the 3rd invitation to the universe banquet of all races at the last moment. The figure lowered his head and looked at the white jade pendant in his hand, an irrepressible joy appearing on his face. This person was the overlord who had received the invitation to the great clan gathering. A few thousand years after Jian Wushuang left the ancient path of stars, the ancient path of stars once again fell into chaos. Many people left the Sword Union, but the first group of core members who followed Jian Wushuang stayed and loyally maintained the development of the Sword Union. The Great Overlord was one of them. After a round of competition, not only did he receive the last invitation to the great clan gathering, but his cultivation had also improved greatly. He had broken through to the ultimate ruler realm dozens of chaos cycles earlier than Jian Wushuang and was at the peak of the unparalleled ruler realm. Now that he had improved greatly, he was only a step away from the divine ruler realm. Just as he was about to leave to tell his ancestor the good news, his ears twitched and he heard the name Jian Wushuang. Eh? What's wrong with the Alliance Master? The Overlord raised his eyebrows, then stepped into the center of the crowd and asked in a deep voice, "Let me ask you, what did you mean by Jian Wushuang's pity?" The group of people who were talking about Jian Wushuang were only at level 5 and had just become an ultimate ruler. When they felt the Overlord's surging blood qi, their hearts trembled. They did not dare to hide anything and quickly told him everything that had happened in the universe recently. Hearing Jian Wushuang's story, the Overlord couldn't calm down for a long time. After a long time, he smiled bitterly and said, "I thought that my cultivation base had improved greatly and I could compete with you. I didn't expect that in just tens of thousands of years, you've grown to the point where you can kill supreme beings." The tyrant couldn't help but feel a little disheartened. The joy he had felt from the great progress in his cultivation and the qualification to participate in the great clan gathering faded a lot. He only felt that he was increasingly catching up with Jian Wushuang and it was increasingly difficult to catch up. In the end, the Overlord shook his head. His eyes flickered, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. Dragon Tribe, Great Void Temple, Cosmos Temple. These 6 powers are all the top powers in the universe. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for the Alliance Master to move if he's chased by them. No, I have to hurry back to the family and ask the Patriarch to protect the Alliance Master. After thinking for a while, the Overlord took a step forward and quickly flew toward an unknown star area in the universe. Desolate area of the universe. At the peak of a towering mountain, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in silence. His black robe was stained with divine blood. The mountain wind blew his disheveled hair, revealing a cold and indifferent face. Under him, divine blood was spilled all over the ground, dyeing the mountain red. One of the 9-clawed octopus heads was particularly eye-catching. 3 days ago, Jian Wushuang had chased them with the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron and killed 9 Supreme Masters on the Tongtian Mountain. Among them, the most powerful one was the Demon Octopus Clan's Patriarch, who was an advanced Supreme. After he killed the 9 great supremes, the huge kill character hanging above his head became more and more enchanting and dazzling. No wonder the Eastern world could slaughter supremes like dogs. The Wushu chaotic cauldron is indeed powerful. Jian Wushuang looked at the Wushu chaotic cauldron in front of him, and his eyes flashed with deep thought. After the Wushu chaos cauldron was awakened, the 5-element qi inside it combined and turned into the power of chaos before the universe was born. It was extremely overbearing. The supreme divine power that was once incomparably powerful in Jian Wushuang's eyes was like an egg hitting a rock when it came into contact with the chaotic power. Could not withstand a single blow. It was with this chaotic force that Jian Wushuang managed to kill the 9 supremes. However, the power of the Wushu chaotic cauldron seems to be not destruction, but creation. Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. At first, he thought that the Wushu chaos cauldron was like the Tarot divine sword, a powerful offensive magic treasure. However, after he observed it carefully, he realized that it was not the case. This was because he felt that although the Wushu chaotic cauldron was powerful, the power of the chaotic force had already reached its limit. In other words, even if he broke through to the supremacy stage or even the invincible supremacy stage in the future, he would only be able to use the Wushu chaotic cauldron as powerful as he was now. At that time, the attack power would appear to be weak. As for the Tarot sword, it was a treasure that was created purely for killing and attacking. At the moment, it seemed to be not as powerful as the Wushu chaotic cauldron. Jian Wushuang could only use a few strikes with all his strength. However, that was because Jian Wushuang had yet to break through to the supreme realm and master the Tarot divine sword. Once he truly grasped the Tarot divine sword, its power would be much more terrifying than the Wushu chaotic cauldron. If I'm not wrong, this Wushu chaotic cauldron is a magic treasure used for attack. It's create a world. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and immersed his divine power into the chaotic space in the Wushu chaotic cauldron. The 5-element qi in the chaotic space combined and turned into chaos, which was breeding a universe of life. However, it seemed that because the Wushu chaotic cauldron was incomplete, the chaotic energy was not able to give birth to life. Once I find the other fragments of the Wushu chaotic cauldron and complete it, I'll be able to use the Wushu chaotic cauldron. Perhaps, within this primal chaos space, one can truly create life within the cosmos. Creation. What a grand and terrifying word. Even Jian Wushuang's heart couldn't help but beat wildly when he thought of this. After a long time, you're thinking too far ahead. For me, breaking through to the refined state is the most important thing. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. After taking a deep breath, he put away the Wushu chaotic cauldron. The battle on the ancient path of stars should have ended by now, which meant that the feast of all races in the universe was about to begin. Other than breaking through to the Supreme Being realm, his strength could no longer advance any further. The only thing he could do now was to wait quietly for the great clan gathering to begin. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang sat on the peak of the mountain and let the strong wind blow across his face. He slowly closed his eyes. Time passed day by day. Just as the universe banquet was about to begin, Jian Wushuang felt the jade pendant that Lady Blue had given him and his heart throbbed. Boom! All of a sudden, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard from afar. Jian Wushuang, with a cold shout, a lightning bolt shot over at an extreme speed. In the beginning, he was still at the edge of the universe, but he was just a small black dot. The next moment, the small black dot suddenly enlarged in Jian Wushuang's pupils and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. The lightning dissipated and turned into a black-robed man who covered his entire face, only revealing a pair of scarlet eyes. Who are you? Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and looked at him. You don't need to know who I am. The black-robed man's voice was hoarse, and his eyes were scarlet. You only need to know that I am here on the orders of the King of Day to take your life. As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man flipped his right hand, and a pitch-black trident appeared in his hand. He had no intention of talking to Jian Wushuang. His supreme divine power surged, and he threw the trident at Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank slightly. He quickly rose into the sky and dodged the attack. Bang! The trident hit the towering mountain where Jian Wushuang was sitting with his legs crossed. In an instant, the entire mountain collapsed with a loud bang, raising a cloud of dust. Sundering stars. A cold voice was heard. Then, a sharp blue sword rainbow slashed out from the dust and sand. It broke through the void and came. Small tricks. The black-robed man didn't care about the star-slashing sword rainbow at all. He casually grabbed with his right hand and instantly shattered the sharp sword rainbow. Jian Wushuang, just use your tarot divine sword and chaotic cauldron. Let's go, he said lightly. Immediately, a peak supreme martial artist cultivation suddenly surged out. It was as if a bomb had been thrown into a calm lake. The entire starry sky boiled as if it could not withstand this huge force, and countless cracks appeared. A top supreme being. Jian Wushuang's body trembled and his heart sank. He had guessed that the 6 major forces would not let him go, but he had not expected that the 6 major forces would think so highly of him and send a top-tier ruler to kill him, an ultimate ruler. One had to know what kind of figures were the top supreme martial artists. Top supreme beings were all famous figures in the universe. They were powerful enough to establish a holy kingdom and become an ancient overlord. Then I'll do as you wish. Although Jian Wushuang was afraid, there was no fear in his eyes. He took out the Wushu chaotic cauldron with his right hand. Go! He shouted in a low voice, and in an instant, the black primordial chaos power was drawn out by Jian Wushuang. Like the heavy water of the sky river, he held it in his hand and slapped it at the black-robed man. Is this the power of the Wushu chaotic cauldron? The black-robed man's eyes gleamed as he pushed forward with both hands, supremely divine power surging out of his hands and colliding with the primal chaos energy. In an instant, the two unparalleled forces collided, and a series of explosions rang out in the sky. The entire starry sky began to collapse under the impact of these two forces, turning into nothingness. Boom! 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 The sleeves of the black-robed man's arms burst open, revealing his lean arms. However, he did not retreat even half a step. Tsk tisk, that's all you got. The next moment, he let out a low and sinister laugh and quickly cast a divine spell, ruthlessly tearing it in 2 directions. Buzz! A shocking scene occurred. The chaotic force that seemed to be able to sweep up the heavy water of the heavenly river was actually torn apart by the black-robed man. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's face turned extremely gloomy. It seemed that the attack power of the Wushu chaotic cauldron was limited to killing an advanced supreme being. To top supreme beings, it would cause some trouble, but it would not be fatal. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. He stepped back with his right foot and quickly retreated. It was obviously not wise to fight this top-tier supreme being head-on. It was better to avoid him for the time being and wait until the grand assembly of all races in the universe started. He had a hunch that the great clan gathering would begin in the next few days. You want to escape? The black-robed man sneered disdainfully. His body shuttled back and forth, once again turning into a bolt of lightning and chasing after Jian Wushuang. The two of them quickly disappeared under the starry sky. Not long after the two of them left, a few more streaks of light arrived. Did you just leave? Supreme Bingyi stepped in the void and his silver eyes turned slightly. A thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. Then, he performed greater teleportation and flew toward Jian Wushuang and the black-robed man at a speed that far exceeded their own. His body flickered like a dot of light. Every time he flickered, he would travel 1,000,000 miles, directly from one star region to another. Just like Supreme Bingyi, Scarlet Sun Demon Master, the Blood Sky Hall Master, and Supreme Qinggo from Cosmos Temple all performed their divine skills to chase after Jian Wushuang after they arrived at the star area that Jian Wushuang had left behind. In the distance, a 6-clawed divine dragon that was 100,000 feet long was shuttling through the clouds and the galaxy. It was devouring the sun and moon as it swam in the sky. There was no emotion in his golden eyes. He was the one sent by the Dragon Clan to kill Jian Wushuang. He was the leader of the 4th generation of the Dragon Clan, Long Qing. Boom! 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 Bang, bang, bang! The black-robed man sent by the great Sun Divine Kingdom followed Jian Wushuang at a moderate pace. Like a cat toying with a mouse, he kept swinging his trident at Jian Wushuang's divine body. Damn it! Jian Wushuang continued to use his chaotic force to block the black-robed man's attacks. Fortunately, the power of the 5 elements in the cauldron was endless. Otherwise, a casual attack from the black-robed man would cause him immeasurable damage. The difference in power between an ultimate ruler and a supreme ruler was simply too great. The chasm between the two was like a heavenly chasm. If it was just him, I'm confident I could defeat him or escape. But Jian Wushuang felt that there were several auras that were not weaker than the black-robed man's, and they were even more powerful. They were rapidly pulling away from him. Jian Wushuang, give up on resisting. I'll be honest with you. Other than me, there's also the Hall Master of Blood Sky Hall, Scarlet Sun Demon Master of the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom, Supreme Bing Yi of the Great Void Temple, Supreme Qing Go of the Cosmos Temple, and Long Qing of the 4th generation of the Dragon Tribe. Every single one of them isn't any weaker than me. Unless the invincible ruler comes out to protect you, you won't be able to escape this calamity, the black-robed man said. Seeing that Jian Wushuang did not respond, he shook his head and continued, Jian Wushuang, if you are tactful and obediently fall into my hands, I can let you die a little easier. However, if you die in the hands of those people, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to die. You're noisy. Before he could finish, Jian Wushuang looked at him coldly and continued to fly forward. You're so stubborn. The black-robed man could not help but sneer when he saw the situation. Endless supreme divine power condensed into a ball in his hand. He pushed it forward and it instantly pierced through the void. Like a knife cutting mud, it broke through the chaotic power and hit Jian Wushuang's back. Even though most of the power of the ball had been destroyed by the chaotic power, it was still far from what Jian Wushuang, an ultimate ruler, could withstand. Immediately, more than half of Jian Wushuang's divine body was blown to pieces. Whoosh! Fortunately, Jian Wushuang was a perfect chaotic special life form. In the blink of an eye, his divine body instantly reassembled. He turned his sword and used eternal night swordsmanship on the black-robed man. The black mist wrapped around the black-robed man and dragged him into the eternal night kingdom. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to continue flying forward, an extremely cold voice suddenly sounded in front of him. Jian Wushuang, you can't escape. Buzz. The next moment, a majestic power that far surpassed Jian Wushuang, and even the black-robed man descended on the world and locked down the surrounding space. Then Jian Wushuang saw the figure of Supreme Bing Yi slowly forming in front of him. Supreme Bing Yi was expressionless and his eyes did not contain any joy or sadness. He looked at Jian Wushuang as if he was looking at an ant that could be crushed easily. Jian Wushuang's heart sank. In the end, he still couldn't escape. Before Jian Wushuang could react, several more figures descended and locked down the starry sky. God Emperor Scarlet Sun, the Blood Sky Palace Master, Supreme Green Dog. The auras that the 3 of them exuded were equally powerful. Even Scarlet Sun Demon Master was also a half-step unparalleled supreme. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but smile bitterly. All paths of retreat had been sealed off. He had become the enemy of the entire world and was bound to die. Jian Wushuang, kill yourself. Don't force me to do anything. And don't try to escape with your innate ability or fantasize about someone coming to save you. Supreme Bing Yi sized up Jian Wushuang and said indifferently. His expression was neither happy nor sad, as if he was a god who controlled the life and death of the common people. He sentenced Jian Wushuang to death. Jian Wushuang, you can only blame yourself for being too talented and having too many good opportunities. Once you break through to the supreme level, the balance that has been maintained with great difficulty will be broken by you. Scarlet Sun Demon Master shook his head and said, Jian Wushuang, you only have yourself to blame for what you've done today. If you had known what was good for you and handed over the Tarot Divine Sword earlier, you wouldn't have been in such a predicament today. That's right, don't take things that don't belong to you. Since you've taken them, you'll have to pay the price. You should have long understood the principle of virtue not being worthy of the place. the other supreme beings said in a cold or sarcastic tone. At that moment, Jian Wushuang was not the number one genius in the universe, nor was he a perfect special life form. In their eyes, he was just an ant that was about to die. Jian Wushuang looked around and swept his gaze across their faces one by one. Then he gradually calmed down. Death? In fact, from the moment he picked up the Tarot Divine Sword, killed Qiulong, and refused to bow his head under the pressure of the six forces, he had already prepared himself mentally. He wasn't surprised by the current outcome. The only thing that made him feel a little guilty and regretful was that the Divine Life Palace had suffered heavy losses for him, and the White Tiger Supreme had died for him, but he was unable to avenge them. In the end, it was difficult to calm down. Just as Jian Wushuang was deep in thought, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the distant sky. A six-clawed golden dragon came from the void, swaying its body and breathing clouds. In the end, with a flash of golden light, it turned into a young man in a golden robe with two horns on his head and a dignified face. This person was the leader of the Dragon Clan's fourth-generation bloodline. Long Qing, the six powers that wanted to kill Jian Wushuang, had finally arrived. When the crowd saw Long Qing, their pupils shrank slightly, and their expressions became more cautious. Long Qing was expressionless. He didn't even look at the other supreme martial artists. Instead, he looked straight at Jian Wushuang and said indifferently, "You are Jian Wushuang? The one who killed that useless Long Han." He. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang collected his thoughts and looked at him. Then, he sneered and asked, "You're asking the obvious? Are you spouting nonsense?" Long Qing squinted his eyes and his face darkened. He said with killing intent, "You're sharp-tongued. Jian Wushuang. It seems like you're still thinking that you're not going to die fast enough." Jian Wushuang laughed disdainfully. To him, the addition or absence of Long Qing would not affect his ending. He didn't care anymore. The only thing he wanted to do now was to use all his strength to drag someone down with him before he died. Even if he died, he would not be a salted fish to be slaughtered. A trapped beast would still fight, not to mention Jian Wushuang. "All right, things will change if we delay. Let's make our move." Supreme Bing Yi coldly spoke. An ice sword covered with spikes was held in his hand. A cold air was emitted from the ice sword, freezing the air 3 feet in the air. The other supreme martial artists nodded their heads and began to prepare for their killing blow. Jian Wushuang instantly fell into the death realm. However, what they did not expect was, at that moment, Jian Wushuang took the initiative to attack. Innate divine power. Original universe. Innate divine ability. Life intimidation. Secret skill of dragon blood. Divine power ignition. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's divine power rose sharply, and his divine body was adjusted to its strongest peak state. With the help of the various realms and divine powers, Jian Wushuang's aura, which represented the limit of an ultimate ruler, actually improved. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly turned and he stared at Long Qing. "Go to hell." Bang! Jian Wushuang took out the Wushu chaotic cauldron first. He drew out chaotic force and smashed it at Long Qing's face. The Tarot Divine Sword. Then Jian Wushuang pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword with his right hand again. The terrifying and surging peak Great Tao divine power poured into the Tarot Divine Sword and he slashed it at Long Qing. A blurry figure of the green-robed sword god reappeared in the world. The Wushu Chaos Cauldron and the Tarot Divine Sword were Jian Wushuang's two strongest killing moves. As soon as the two killing moves were used, the entire starry sky suddenly made a shattering sound. The sealing secret skills that the top Supreme Masters had used couldn't hold on and slightly exploded. However, this was not the end. Jian Wushuang crushed the jade token on his waist again. It contained two of the ruler Bloodwave's top powers. All the killing moves were aimed at Long Qing at the same time. Boom! At this moment, the world changed colors and the sun and moon shattered. Long Qing looked at Jian Wushuang, who was charging at him, and immediately understood Jian Wushuang's intention. He laughed in anger. "Jian Wushuang, do you think you're worthy of taking me down with you?" He opened his mouth. Dark clouds gathered in his mouth, lightning shuttled back and forth, and countless energy dense. Then, the energy condensed and turned into a destructive light wave, which blasted toward Jian Wushuang. Kacha! In an instant, the sealing enchantment set up by several supreme martial artists was broken. The light wave of destruction collided with Jian Wushuang's first killing move, Chaotic Force. Pong pong pong. A loud boom rang out between the two, as if chaos had reappeared and everything was silent. A huge black shock wave seemed to condense and spread out fiercely. Not to mention the killing move of the two, just the shock wave alone could kill any expert below the Supreme Being level. Even a beginner-stage Supreme Being would be killed by the shock wave. Is this the power of the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron? Supreme Bing Yi, the Blood Sky Hall Master, Supreme Green Dog, and the others looked at this scene. They first casually drew back the surging shock waves, then squinted their eyes with a strange look. Although this power couldn't threaten them, it was enough to allow an ultimate ruler to cross several realms and pose a threat to an advanced supreme. It was truly powerful. After Jian Wushuang's death, I'll give you the Tarot Divine Sword and other opportunities. But I'll take the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron, Scarlet Sun Demon Master said as he licked his lips. Although Jian Wushuang was not dead yet, they had already regarded him as a dead man and started to divide up his magic weapons. Bang! The boundless power dissipated. The destructive light wave in Long Qing's mouth, although much of its power was obliterated, dispersed the chaotic power and went to meet Jian Wushuang's second killing move, the Tarot Divine Sword. In this sword, the previously blurry figure in green could be seen clearly. One could even see the figure's delicate and clear facial features. At first glance, it looked like a supreme tarot descending to the world, but also like an immortal from the 9 heavens walking out of the gate of heaven with a sword and splitting the sea with a sword. The stroke contained all kinds of power that Jian Wushuang had added to it. It was his peak attack and his most brilliant attack. Under this sword, the entire universe's starry sky exploded. Even the black-robed man, Supreme Green Dog, and the other top-tier Supremes felt a sharp sword energy sweep through them, and they couldn't help but take half a step back. The Tarot Divine Sword. This is the Tarot Divine Sword? Everyone raised their heads and looked at the dark golden sword in Jian Wushuang's hand. Their hearts skipped a beat. The Wushu Chaotic Cauldron had appeared in a very distant era, so they didn't know much about the Wushu Chaos and weren't very interested in it. However, the Tarot Sword had dominated the entire universe 300 chaos cycles ago. Many of the rulers present had experienced that era and knew how terrifying the Tarot Sword was. They looked at the dazzling golden light of the Tarot Divine Sword, which seemed to be shining through the ages, and their breathing quickened. Jian Wushuang, you only have the Tarot Divine Sword. Even when Tarot Supreme was still alive, he didn't dare to provoke our dragon clan. Who do you think you are? Long Qing snorted disdainfully. He controlled the destructive light waves from his mouth to meet the unparalleled sword. Is that so? Jian Wushuang was expressionless. The Tarot Divine Sword in his hand emitted a brilliant golden light. It cut through the sea of destruction light wave and broke through all obstacles. What? Long Qing's heart jolted with shock. For countless chaos cycles, he had always stayed within the dragon race and had never seen the universe beyond the dragon race. The idea that had been instilled in his mind was that the dragon race was the highest, most powerful, and most noble race in the entire universe. Therefore, he looked down on the entire universe and didn't put anyone in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, who was merely an ultimate ruler, was even regarded as a pig, dog, and catfish that he could kill at will. But now, as he looked at this sword, he knew that he was wrong, and he was very wrong. The destructive light wave that he had casually unleashed was completely unable to block this destructive sword. This move didn't bring out the Tarot Divine Sword's full power, but with the support of Jian Wushuang's various secret skills, the Tarot Divine Sword was truly activated at this moment. The vertical eye on the hilt of the sword had countless blood streaks congregating in its pupil like small snakes, letting out a furious roar that came from the 9 heavens. Bang! The sword landed on Long Qing's body. Whoosh! Countless dark golden dragon blood poured down. As if a rain of blood had fallen from the sky, Long Qing was sent flying thousands of feet away. His golden dragon robe was torn apart, and one of his dragon horns was almost cut off, leaving a deep sword mark on it. Long Qing half knelt in the void and slowly raised his head. A trace of dark golden dragon blood flowed out of his mouth. Jian Wushuang, you deserve to die. Long Qing roared mournfully. His indifferent face couldn't remain calm anymore. The blue veins on his forehead were throbbing. Apparently, he was in a rage. What a disgrace. He had never been humiliated like this before. He, Long Qing, was the leader of the fourth generation of the dragon bloodline. He was strong enough to fight against the top supreme beings and look down on the entire universe. He thought of himself as a noble and respected existence. Wherever he went, there was no one who didn't submit. But today he was actually injured by a mere ultimate ruler. This was the greatest humiliation he had ever suffered since he was born. This kind of humiliation was worse than taking his life. Jian Wushuang's face was pale and his right hand was trembling. The moment he swung the sword, the Tarot Divine Sword had sucked all of his power dry. Now all the secret skills that he had used to boost his strength had receded like a tide. He suddenly felt a sense of weakness that he had never felt before. This feeling of weakness almost made him unable to stand. His entire body was on the verge of collapse, and the Tarot Divine Sword almost fell out of his hand. However, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but laugh when he saw Long Qing's sorry state. He laughed wildly, scornfully, and unscrupulously. A mere dragon clan is nothing more than this. Boom! The jade pendant on Jian Wushuang's waist shattered, and two shadows of the Blood Wave Supreme condensed and pressed down on Long Qing again. This was the all-out attack that the Blood Wave Supreme had left on Jian Wushuang. At that moment, Jian Wushuang knew that he had no chance of survival, so he directly used the two full-force attacks at the same time. The two shadows were tens of thousands of feet tall. Their legs were like mountains. Their eyes were like stars. An endless blood qi was swirling around them. They looked at Long Qing with a stiff and numb expression, then raised their hands and attacked. Jian Wushuang, you were able to hurt me just now because I was careless. Do you think you can still be so lucky? Long Qing's eyes were filled with killing intent as he spoke coldly. Long Qing opened his mouth in the face of the Blood Wave Supremacy's all-out attack, and a fist-sized golden bead slowly rose from his mouth.